So hello everyone, good afternoon and very welcome to you. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the talk concert of BrainLink X Lab Day at the Korea Federation of Science and Technology Society. On behalf of Korea University, as well as our sponsor, the Ministry of Science and ICT of Republic of Korea, I extend greeting to all of you. Thank you for joining us to explore one of the most pressing topic of our time, sustainable soil management and biodiversity conservation strategy, linked to ESG and sustainability. Our agenda has insightful discussion and innovative idea, from soil health and biodiversity to sustainability in mining and critical mineral and plastic waste valorization, machine learning for carbon capture. The topic we will explore are both timely and impactful. So networking is a key highlight of this gathering. Take the time to connect with the peers, speakers, partners. These interactions often spark collaboration that drive meaningful progress throughout this meeting. I have a special thanks to you, the speakers, and Professor Xiangju Yuan and Professor Longbin Huang, Professor Scott Chang, Professor Jocelyn Klebe, Professor Daniel Alessi, Professor Philip Tech, and Professor Daniel Zhang. Thank you so much for coming to attend this important meeting. And also I'd like to especially thanks to Professor Luo and other foreign participants who joining this important meeting for today. And to our audience, your passion for creating a sustainable future is what makes this event truly special. So let's make the most of these 3 days and work together to build a brighter and more sustainable world. As you know, this is the very first day event, and then tomorrow early in the morning we will move to another city and have a 2-day event in Busan. So before we start into our talk concert, we will watch an introductory video about the X Lab. So you'll understand what is the X Lab, prepared by our ministry and the Korean Federation of Science and Technology Society. And once again, welcome to the talk concert at the Federation of Science and Technology Society buildings. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Amidst the world's rapidly accelerating changes and competition, what kind of future are you preparing for? We are chartering a path to the future through science and technology exchanges, bolstered by international cooperation. In this era, where scientific and technological competitiveness is directly linked to a nation's diplomacy and security, the power to overcome such challenges lies in international cooperation that fosters synergy through collective efforts, and from talents who will shape the forthcoming era. The scholars of the world are gathering in Korea. A platform that facilitates exchanges between Korean and international scholars, as well as between seasoned and emerging researchers, is taking shape. BrainLink X Lab Day, organized by the Korean Federation of Science and Technology Societies, aims to be a global hub of talent. By consistently enhancing and expanding the global talent network, we're laying the groundwork for a brighter future. By inviting global scholars, X Lab Day provides an opportunity for young Korean researchers to glean insights from the vast knowledge and experience of both Korean and international scholars, as well as to engage in collaborative research. BrainLink X Lab Day establishes a global science and technology network among overseas scholars and Korean researchers. In 2024, BrainLink X Lab Day will be joined by globally renowned scholars, including Professor Luke Pyeong-se Lee of Harvard Medical School, Professor Andrew Goodwin of University of Oxford, Emeritus Professor Teruo Okano of Tokyo Women's Medical University, Jeffrey Newmark of NASA Goddard Space Flight Center Research Astrophysics, and Professor Dan I. Anderson of Uppsala University. The discussions will span 12 national strategic technology fields, pivotal to Korea's advancement, including the three game changers: quantum mechanics, nuclear technology, and AI. The event will see the participation of 40 Korean and international scientists and engineers. With two organizers leading each technical segment, the gathering will foster in-depth academic exchanges, encompassing the sharing of recent trends and information in core technology fields, in-depth discussions on research findings, and the sharing of ideas. And talk concerts will be held in collaboration with all BrainLink XLab Day sessions. The focus of XLab Day is connectivity and sustainability. Following the event, communities and clubs will be established based on each XLab Day session to ensure ongoing dialogue among attendees and promote collaborative research. COAST supports the reinforcement and expansion of the networks established through XLab Day. COAST, the organizer of XLab Day, stands as a beacon for Korea's science and technology society. Established in 1966, its mission has been to safeguard and amplify the rights and interests of scientists and engineers. Our endeavors extend to enhancing the public's grasp of science and technology and furthering its development through comprehensive policy research, planning, surveys, and consultations. As Korea's largest science and technology network with over 600 affiliated organizations, we are committed to promoting domestic and international cooperation and exchange. In the transformative era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where science and technology spearhead groundbreaking challenges, COAST remains dedicated to its role as a facilitator of scientific and technological innovations.
안녕하십니까. 한국과학기술단체 총연합회 회장 이태식입니다. 과총은 사회참여 확대와 권익신장을 도모하기 위해서 1966년 설립한 공익법인으로서 과학기술단체 육성 지원과 다양한 정책 연구, 기획, 조사, 자문을 통해 과학기술 발전에 기여하고 있습니다. 저는 2023년 과총회장으로 취임하여 새로운 도약을 위한 비전 프라이드 코스를 선언하였으며 이를 실현하기 위한 운영 목표와 추진 전략을 중심으로 빛나는 100년을 향해 모든 역량을 집중해 나가고 있습니다. 더 나아가 우리나라가 미래 핵심 기술 분야를 선도하는 기술 주권 국가로 자리매김하도록 국가적인 원팀 플레이를 이루는 데 있어 강력한 조력자가 되겠습니다. 대단히 감사합니다.
BrainLink XLab Day aims to broaden both domestic and international talent networks and become a global hub of talent. By making XLab Day into an event that scientists and engineers worldwide eagerly join, we intend to elevate Korea's global standing and bolster national competitiveness. Global Talent Hub, BrainLink XLab Day.
Thank you very much, Professor Ok, for your insightful welcome speech. Now we can dive into our session. Before we begin, please ensure that your mobile phones are set to vibrate or silent mode to avoid any disruptions during this event. And please inform that this session will be recorded and will be uploaded in YouTube. Hence, I would like you to kindly request our speakers to adhere with the timing. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today, Professor Scott Chung from University of Alberta, Canada. He is an expert in land reclamation, forest soils, agroforestry, and nutrient cycling. Today, he will be presenting on the topic, Biodiversity Affects Soil Carbon, Nitrogen, phosphorus and implications for global sustainability. Let's welcome Professor Chung to the stage with a big round of applause, everyone.
Well, great. Thank you for the introduction. And since I know all the speakers and the organizers so well, I guess I'm allowed to make a joke. I'm obviously honored to be the first one to give the talk. And I'm pretty sure that's because I'm the oldest, right? All right, so for my formal presentation, I would really much like to thank Professor Oak for organizing this and the Ministry of Science and Technology for supporting this activity. So for my presentation, the title is Plant Biodiversity Affects Soil Carbon, Nitrogen, and Phosphorus, and Implications for Global Sustainability. So in my talk, I'm going to use two of my work that have been published. And so the first one is going to be based on a national data set. It's based on a long-term monitoring project. And the second one is based on global meta-analysis and data synthesis. And so the first one is on carbon and nitrogen, and the second one is on phosphorus. So we are facing many different challenges globally. Climate change is one of them. And we all know climate is changing. And this is the temperature increase over the last, between 1993 and 2022, global in really obvious. And the climate change is strongly linked to increases in the global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration or greenhouse gas concentrations. And so we would then have to find ways to try to reduce greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere by increasing the carbon sink in the terrestrial ecosystems as well as in the ocean. The second challenge we are facing is loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity is strongly linked to ecosystem function, such as ecosystem stability, nutrient cycling ecosystems, as well as the provision of goods and services, such as carbon sequestration. So we have to find ways to preserve biodiversity so we can preserve the ecosystem function and goods and services. Otherwise, we would see biodiversity to keep losing biodiversity, and that has really strong consequences for ecosystem services. The third challenge we are facing is depletion of resources, and resources including plant nutrients, which includes nitrogen and phosphorus, for example. Both nutrients will be lost from the ecosystem if the ecosystem is experiencing harvesting, or in forest ecosystems, in terms of harvesting wood, or in agriculture production systems, crop harvesting, and those harvesting will be accompanied with removal of nutrients, and so depletion of nutrients from those ecosystems would have to be replaced in some form. In terms of phosphorus in particular, this is a fairly special nutrient, different from the nitrogen. Both nitrogen and phosphorus are required essential nutrients for plants. Phosphorus has been shown to be lost from ecosystems through plant harvesting in one way, and secondly, loss of phosphorus through soil erosion and so forth. Phosphorus is also fairly unique is because phosphorus has to be mined, which is really different from the nitrogen, which can be synthesized through the nitrogen contained in the atmosphere. So phosphorus is a really limited resources. So we have to be really careful with managing phosphorus. Those challenges are all interlinked. Biodiversity is linked to ecosystem productivity, ecosystem functions, and so those include carbon nitrogen cycling, phosphorus cycling, and so forth. Through past work, we have a really good understanding of the relationship between biodiversity and ecosystem function. This is based on a paper published in 2012 in Nature, and another publication in 2016 in Science, both indicating that ecosystem diversity has a strong linkage to function and ecosystem productivity. But in terms of plant biodiversity, effects on soil, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycling is less understood. And those have implications for human food security because nitrogen and phosphorus, again, are essential nutrients. If there's a lack of those nutrients, it's going to affect ecosystem productivity and food production in agriculture production systems. And for carbon and nitrogen, both of them have implications for the mitigation of global climate change. So in terms of plant diversity and carbon and nitrogen cycling, we understand by now that there is a very strong linkage between plant diversity and ecosystem productivity. High plant diversity will increase ecosystem productivity, which then is going to increase litter fall and root exudate, different forms of carbon input that eventually would increase carbon sequestration, nitrogen and carbon storage in the ecosystem. Okay. And increased litter input would also have implications for rate of decomposition, and that would return to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. In addition to that, input of new carbon, fresh carbon or organic matter into the ecosystem would also have implications for potentially increasing the mineralization of existing or native soil carbon in the system. So the priming effect. And so at the end, whether that's going to increase soil carbon storage in the system or not is really going to depend on the balance of these different processes. The nitrogen is the same thing. Plant diversity is going to affect nitrogen formations in different ways and eventually going to affect the storage of nitrogen in the ecosystem. So one of the key questions then is, will tree diversity or plant diversity increase soil carbon and nitrogen in complex natural forests? In manipulative experiments or in more of man-made ecosystems, we have a fairly good understanding of these relationships, but in natural ecosystem, we don't. So manipulative experiments is based on small-scale experiments in more homogeneous conditions versus natural ecosystems, much more complex, larger scale. And so understanding or scaling up our understanding in those simplified systems to the natural ecosystem is going to be a fairly big step. So based on that, we used the Canada's National Forest Inventory database to explore the relationships between plant diversity and carbon and nitrogen cycling in Canadian forests, natural forests, based on 406 plots and based on long-term monitoring. So the first, the plots were established in 2000 to 2006 and were then repeatedly measured in between 2008 and 2017. And this work has already been published last year in Nature with my former postdoc. The data here is showing that the plots that we studied included a range of biodiversity and climatic conditions and so forth. So those form fairly good gradients of biodiversity and so forth. Within the work, we developed we looked at 5 different functional traits in these different forest ecosystems. For example, a specific leaf area, leaf nitrogen content per leaf dry mass, and leaf phosphorus content per leaf dry mass, and so forth. And those represent trees' ability to acquire nutrients or resources for their growth. And the last 2 functional traits, wood density and tree height, representing functional traits that support the trees, so providing physical support. And those functional traits are then decomposed in a principal component analysis, and so that then again is divided into acquisitive traits and supportive traits in those systems. So from our initial analysis, we did some simple correlation analysis, and we did find that there is a really strong relationship between biodiversity and above ground primary productivity. above ground primary activity increased with plant diversity, which is as we expected. When we were looking at soil carbon nitrogen accumulation and above ground primary production, there was actually no relationship, which was to our surprise. When we were looking at carbon nitrogen accumulation in the organic horizon in those forest ecosystems, we again didn't find biodiversity relationships. So this is again to our surprise. When we were looking at carbon accumulation in the mineral soil horizon, we did find that the carbon accumulation in the mineral horizon was increasing with functional diversity. In terms of nitrogen accumulation in these mineral horizons, they were in response to the increased evenness and functional diversity in these forest ecosystems. So those supports some of our hypotheses, but the lack of some of the relationship between plant diversity and particularly carbon nitrogen accumulation in the organic horizons, we thought that was because organic horizons are much more variable. They can be affected by forest fire, changes in climate conditions, and so forth. So obviously in the mineral soil horizon, the relationship is much stronger because these plant diversity effects can be accumulated over the longer term. So in contrast with the organic soil horizon. While I don't have a lot of time to present all the data, I'm going to use the diversity to carbon accumulation in the mineral soil horizon as an example. Here we show that biodiversity has a strong relationship with carbon accumulation in the mineral soil horizon, particularly the functional diversity and the so-called community-weighted mean of the second axis, the principal component analysis, which represents the ability of the ecosystem to support the trees. So this is related to the tree height and wood density and so forth. Those have positive direct effects on carbon accumulation in the mineral soil. And this is based on the surface mineral soil, 0 to 15 centimeters. Species richness and species evenness has an indirect but positive effect on carbon accumulation in those mineral soils. The story on the nitrogen is really similar. Okay? Both functional diversity and the functional traits supporting the trees have direct positive effects on nitrogen accumulation in the mineral soil. Species richness and again species evenness have positive but indirect effects on nitrogen accumulation in the mineral soil. So the second part of my work is going to be looking at biodiversity effects on phosphorus. And this, again, is based on a global meta-analysis. Within this work, we were looking at two major potential mechanisms that's going to underlie the plant diversity effect on soil phosphorus. The first one is the resource partitioning, because in those ecosystems or plant communities with higher biodiversity, we would expect those coexisting species in diverse plant mixtures or plant communities to have really different strategies. They have diverse strategies in terms of their ability to harvesting soil phosphorus in space, time, and chemical forms. And that's going to cause the greater utilization of phosphorus in those plant communities with a higher diversity. The second potential mechanism is the facilitation. So if we have a higher plant diversity, we expect, again, higher plant productivity. We then would expect that to support a higher microbial communities, and those would then facilitate phosphatase activities in the ecosystem. The facilitation would also include higher plant diversity, promoting phosphorus solubilizing or mobilizing plant species, and at the end, promoting soil phosphorus availability. Within this work, we were also looking at potential differences between phosphorus cycling in the rhizosphere versus in the bulk soil. And phosphorus, for those of you who have studied phosphorus will know that phosphorus is a really unique nutrient because its mobility in the soil is really slow. So plants would really have to access to the phosphorus in the rhizosphere, where the root system has direct access to the phosphorus. So we would expecting that phosphorus will be taken up in the rhizosphere, depleting those, and through nutrient cycling, some of those phosphorus will be returned to the soil and potentially increasing the phosphorus storage in the bulk soil. So we are hypothesizing that phosphorus is going to be affected by plant diversity between the rhizosphere soil and the bulk soil in different way. So based on that hypothesis, we conducted a meta-analysis based on 180 studies. Data was collected from the literature, and this is the distribution of the studies that we collected. So we were looking at the differences. We're comparing the differences between plant communities that are diverse, and this is looking at plant mixtures as compared to community that only has one plant species, so monocultures. Okay, so that's the essence of this meta-analysis, comparing ecosystems with diverse communities or plant mixtures versus monocultural plant communities. So the first hypothesis that we are trying to test is plant mixtures will increase soil total phosphorus and available phosphorus in the bulk soil, but will decrease them in the rhizosphere soil, again, based on my earlier explanation that plant roots will be taking up phosphorus excessively from the rhizosphere. So the data is showing that, yes, there was a positive effect of plant diversity on phosphorus, total phosphorus in the bulk soil, and also soil available phosphorus in the bulk soil, but there was actually not a decrease in the total phosphorus or available phosphorus in the rhizosphere soil. So that hypothesis is only partially supported. The second hypothesis we are testing in this meta-analysis is that plant mixture will increase soil phosphatase activity with greater positive effects in the rhizosphere than in the bulk soil. So this hypothesis was, again, only partially supported. We did see increase in the phosphatase activity in both in the rhizosphere soil and in the bulk soil, but there was no difference between the two compartments. Okay, so this, again, is only partially supported. And the third hypothesis is effects of plant mixtures on soil total phosphorus, phosphatase activity, and available phosphorus will increase with species richness and functional group richness in the mixture. So this is looking at these diverse plant communities, whether those would change with plant species richness. Okay, and this is, again, only partially supported. The highlighted diagrams illustrates positive relationships relating to total phosphorus, phosphatase activities. There was a negative relationship between soil available phosphorus and functional group richness in those mixtures. Okay, so this, again, the third hypothesis is, again, only partially supported. There was really strong diversity, plant diversity, soil compartment interactions. It's really clear in the top two diagrams. For example, we are looking at species richness to increase total phosphorus and phosphatase activities to be really different between the rhizosphere soil compartment and the bulk soil compartment. The soil available phosphorus is a different story. In the bulk soil, there was an increase with functional group richness, but there was a decrease in the rhizosphere soil. So what we saw earlier, the decrease in the available phosphorus with this plant diversity was essentially caused by the decrease in the available phosphorus in the rhizosphere soil. And the fourth hypothesis that we are testing is that there will be a positive effect of species richness on soil phosphatase activity and available phosphorus, and those will be strongly linked to plant productivity. And the second diagram here essentially illustrates that point or supports that hypothesis. So this hypothesis is certainly supported by our results. We also did look at the differences between different ecosystem types, because in this meta-analysis we included ecosystems of forests, croplands, and grasslands, and so forth. We didn't find any differences among these ecosystem types, which suggests that these relationships stand across the different ecosystem types. We also were looking at whether the magnitude of mixture effects is dependent on stand age, the presence of nitrogen-fixing plants, the mean annual temperature, and the climatic condition, aridity index, soil properties such as soil pH, material type, or the initial or background phosphorus availability. And the answer to that is negative. So they were not affected by those. So again, it illustrates that the relationship between plant diversity and soil phosphorus cycling is regardless of these conditions. So it's quite universal in this sense. So to summarize my presentation, we find that tree diversity increased the rate of decadal soil carbon and nitrogen accumulation in Canadian natural forests. And those in the mineral soil horizon were particularly influenced by functional diversity, while in the organic horizon was more influenced by the evenness. So phosphorus, phosphate has activity, and available phosphorus were increased by increasing the species mixtures or with plant communities with higher diversity as compared to monocultures. So more phosphorus is being conserved in diverse mixtures, and available phosphorus being more completely utilized in these diverse plant communities, and leading to lower loss of phosphorus and the increase of phosphorus in the ecosystem. This is also related to the greater transfer of phosphorus in the deeper soils into the surface soil, because our study, or most of the studies that's available in the literature, unfortunately, is limited to the surface soil. Most of the study on the surface soil. So we hypothesize that that's because of the increased translocation of phosphorus from the deeper soil to the surface soil, causing that increase in the phosphorus storage. So our work essentially validates the inference from manipulative experiments to natural forest ecosystems that biodiversity increased soil carbon and nitrogen storage, as well as phosphorus availability and storage in the soil. And therefore, the implication of that is that we need to conserve biodiversity to preserve these ecosystem functions. And even in developing management practices, we also need to pay attention to increasing plant diversity. We need to maximize above and below ground carbon by increasing tree diversity to improve carbon and nitrogen sequestration or storage in these ecosystems. So biodiversity conservation not only increases ecosystem production, but also enhance soil phosphatase activity, increase phosphorus retention. This again has implications for long-term ecosystem sustainability, and implications for productivity of future vegetation or future ecosystems. So conserving biodiversity to enhance global sustainability, including carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, is really important. And lastly, acknowledgement for funding from the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, or NSERC, the National Science Foundation in the United States, as well as a banding postdoc fellowship to my former postdoc, and the data that's been provided to us from the Canadian National Forest Inventory Program, and contributions to some of our co-authors in the publications, Anthony Taylor, Peter Rich, Masuni Hasanu, and Han Chen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chung, for your insightful presentation on the role of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus in global sustainability. Now we will move on to our next session. We are fortunate to have Professor Jörg Rinkelbe with us here, the former president of International Society for Trace Element Biogeochemistry and an expert in soil science and environmental pollution from University of Wuppertal, Germany. Professor Rinkelbe will be sharing valuable insights on pollution control in soil and water. Please join me in welcoming Professor Rinkelbe to the stage. Let's give him a big round of applause.
So thank you for this kind introduction and a very pleasant afternoon to everyone, and special thanks go to the organizers of this conference. Thank you for having me here, for inviting me. It's my pleasure for being here and deliver this talk today. Pollution control in soil and water. Water is a precious resource, is precondition for all life and is used in many technologies, and Doppler is a key player for many ecological functions. And soils are in manifold interactions with different spheres, such as with the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and with the biosphere. And those soils can be polluted, and when they are polluted, then they can have an impact of the Sustainable Development Goals, such as no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, and life on land. But we need to be aware that environmental pollution is one of the most pressing issues of the human mankind. You may think on hormones, you may think on antibiotics, you may also think on different other contaminants, toxic elements, PFAS, for instance. Very often soils and environment are exposed to plastics, to metals, metalloids, and persistent organic pollutions. And for instance, PFAS, poly and perfluoride substances are such an example, but also plastics. You all heard about it. Plastics are such a big issue in the ocean, in the water, but also in the soil. And here are a few examples for important reviews about PFAS, about toxic elements, about PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, about plastics, and also about trace elements. When we have a look on the source and cycle of toxic elements in ecosystems, then we need to realize that on one hand there are a number of geogenic sources, which include forest fires, which also include volcano activities, and on the other hand we also have numerous sources which are caused by man, which are man-made anthropogenic sources, which include industrial activities, which also include numerous agricultural activities, which are plotted here, which also include mining. And this plot illustrates a spatial distribution of selected heavy metals around the world in the air. If we have a look on lead and on cadmium, then we are able to identify different hotspots around the world, especially in Southeast Asia when it comes to cadmium and lead. And in mercury, we also see a hotspot here in Southeast Asia. And when it comes to mercury in soil, then a hotspot is here in Southern America. This has something to do with gold mining, because mercury has a high affinity to gold. But we can see in the Arabic world and here in Southeast Asia, a number of elements are elevated, including lead, cadmium, but also including antimony, arsenic, and mercury, which are not plotted here. But if you link this to the number of rice growing seasons around the world, green is 1, blue is 2, red is 3 rice growing seasons, and then you can observe that the number of rice growing seasons meets those highly elevated areas around the world, which gives an implication that rice paddy fields are especially exposed to those contaminations. you know, those rice paddy fields underlie natural dynamic conditions. Here in Asia, we have many of those rice paddy fields. You know, there's billions of people around the world are fed by rice, and that rice paddy fields are very important as food, as staple food for billions of people. But on the other hand, rice paddy fields has an important the water management is very important, can be dried, can be flooded, and on the other hand, wetlands can serve as sinks, sources and transformers of pollutions and nutrients, and as such, they can have a significant impact on water quality and ecosystem productivity in both in riverine and coastal zones. And when we are talking about wetlands, then we need to be aware that wetlands include coastal areas, include also marshes, bogs, fens, rice paddies, and also floodplain soils. And the problem is that many wetland soils are polluted with many contaminants, especially also with toxic elements. So there is a mobilization, there is a transfer into the groundwater, into the plants, and finally it ends up in the food chain. And this is, without any doubts, a potential risk. So when we have those contaminated sites, the first step is always to measure how much of those elements, contaminants, are in the field, to quantify the concentrations of trace elements. Secondly, we determine the forms of bounding of the minerals. This gives us an indication about the mobilization and immobilization of those elements. Field monitoring is also an important step to verify the results which you gained in the lab, and of course specific laboratory experiments are also very important. That means if you aim to conduct a proper risk assessment, then you need to work on all of those different techniques. Some time ago we wrote together this review about the fate of metals in wetland soils and the factors which have an impact on the mobility and availability of heavy metals, which are plotted here. And there are a number of factors which are involved in the mobilization of those elements, including inorganic ligands, carbonates, clay, iron, sulfur chemistry. It's pretty much complex. I don't want to go too much in detail, just to say many factors affect the mobilization and immobilization of metals. But it's very important and quite challenging that to understand the major biogeochemical processes in this context, which is quite challenging. It's not that easy, but important to get a better picture, which is closer to the reality, closer to nature, is that we need to work on different scales, from the atomic scale over molecular microscopic scale, over the macroscopic scale and the field scale, and finally on the global scale, and to exploit those different techniques which are plotted here on the different scales, finally to come to a better understanding and a better assessment of the processes of mobilization and immobilization of contaminants in our environment. For this, we are working on different parts of the world, in different parts of Europe, but also in Egypt, on the Mississippi Delta, and different parts of Asia, such as China, also Korea, together with Professor Oak, Taiwan, Indonesia, but also in California, Texas, Arkansas, Delaware, Louisiana, and Bolivia as well. And I also have a postdoc working in Ghana, working on e-waste sites, and I have also a new project now in Brazil. But today I would like to present you a short story about Germany. Here is Europe and here is Germany. And we don't have rice paddy fields in Germany, that's too cold. But we have a lot of other different wetlands, coastal areas and floodplain soils. And here you can see the different floodplain soils, only the major rivers. So we have a lot of wetlands in Germany as well. Here are the different catchment areas of the major rivers from Germany, and I had a big project where we collected 26,000 samples, which we analyzed, And here I would like to draw your attention to the area where I'm coming from the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. And the biggest river in Germany here is the Rhine River. And here's a small river, Wupper River, which flows into the Rhine River in Wuppertal. That's the city where I'm coming from. And here I have a special study site which I would like to introduce to you. This is an old industrial area with a long pollution history. The floodplain soils of the Wupper River are historically polluted due to the discharge of waste originating from grinding, bleaching, and drying during the last centuries, about 300 years ago. And here's such an example of one soil, an Utrecht Fluvisol, a particular soil horizon. This one here is pH of 6.4, dominated by silt, and it's contaminated with cadmium, arsenic, copper, lead, and zinc, and many others, and is characterized through a high content of soil organic carbon, more than 7%. And as you may know, soil organic carbon serves as a carrier for many pollutions, including heavy metals, and this was reason enough for us to look more in detail into the composition of the soil organic matter. And we did that using NMR spectroscopy, and we were able to identify that the large amount of soil organic matter from this particular soil consists of aromatic compounds, which are lignine, black carbon, and also charcoal. But we were also able to determine carboxyl carbon, ON substitute, which can be found in cellulose, and also aliphatic carbon compounds. And when we have a look on those specific this specific soil horizon and particular particle here on SEM scanning electron microscope with EDX, then we did this elemental mapping, and what you can easily see is that this particular particle consists mainly here of lead. And this lead is associated with manganese, but also a little bit with iron and aluminum. And here, those black parts are mainly consist of silicon, which indicates that this is quartz. So far, so nice. But we have one challenge in the nature, that nature is continuously changing. So that means environmental conditions are changing continuously. That's why we try to mimic changing environmental conditions in the laboratory, the best what we can do, and this enables us to forecast the mobilization of toxic compounds into the environment. And we are doing this using a specialized technique, so-called biogeochemical microcosm system, and this system enables us to control the redox potential, which is a key driver in wetland soils, along with the pH, and we can control it systematically, and we can set predefinite redox conditions over a very, very wide range. And this is how the apparatus looks like. Here we simulate the flooding in this reactor. We flood the soil and we continuously stir it. Then we have sensors there, temperature, pH, and sorry. And redox potential, and those sensors measure in a very high temporal resolution every 5 minutes those three parameters, temperature, pH, and EH, and we are able to control the redox potential through the addition of oxygen. We can stepwise increase the redox, and through the addition of nitrogen, we can lower the redox potential, and all this is connected with a data logger, with a computer control, and this is how the system looks in the reality in the lab. Blue line is for oxygen, black for nitrogen, and here you can see the soil slurry which we create, and here's the online measurement of the different parameters, EH, pH, and temperature. I have 16 of those units in my lab, and those are worldwide unique. This is also the reason why many people around the world joining my team to conducting specific experiments. And the big advantage is that we are able to simulate dynamic environmental conditions which enable us to predict the mobilization of some elements. So I have one example for you how such an experiment can look like. This experiment was running over 22 days. On the left-hand side is plotted the redox potential, ZAH in millivolt, which is the green line, and on the right-hand side it's plotted the arsenic concentration in the dissolved phase, which is in olive color. And what you can see here, what we did, we increased the redox potential stepwise in steps of about 100 millivolt, keep it constant, and then decrease the redox potential stepwise again. And what you can observe is that under anoxic conditions, the mobilization of arsenic into the soil solution is becoming very high, here in the beginning and also at the end. And vice versa, under oxic conditions, the mobilization of arsenic is very low. This gives us certain implications for management of those sites. If those soils are flooded, you can expect a certain release of arsenic into the environment. This has something to do with the redox-sensitive behavior of arsenic and also with the associated elements and factors which are involved, such as iron and sulfur chemistry. I don't want to go too much in detail in it, but the same experiment, let's have a look on the dissolved organic carbon, the same time duration, arsenic, and now we have a look on dissolved organic carbon, which is plotted here in black. And you may know that dissolved organic carbon acts as a carrier for many contaminants, and you can easily observe that the pattern is pretty much similar. So there are some interactions between between dissolved organic carbon and arsenic. There's also some relations, and the next factor is also iron, which has an impact on the mobilization of arsenic. This is because iron and arsenic have a high affinity, and the pattern between the mobilization of iron and arsenic is very similar. This was because we conducted the redox potential in this way. Under anoxic conditions, the iron become mobilized to iron 2+, and the former arsenic, which was bounded to the iron oxides and hydroxides, becoming released, becoming mobilized, and this is what we can observe here. And no wonder that those two parameters correlates pretty well. Of course, we also go more in detail into the speciation of arsenic in both in the dissolved phase, but also in the liquid, also in the solid phase, using ICP-MS and using also synchrotron techniques. But I don't want to go too much in the geochemistry today due to time reasons. So the biogeochemical microcosm system allows mechanistically studies of pollution control processes in soils, sediment, and waters, and it further allows to study the kinetics and dynamics of trace elements and other harmful substances, and it also allows to study the amendments and the impact of different amendments on various substances. Those can be biochar, can also be clay minerals, carbonates, with aim to decrease the mobilization of pollutions, which we use then as remediation technologies. So, and then we can, in this way, check if our remediation technologies are really sustainable, how long-lasting they are, even under changing environmental conditions. The biogeochemical microcosm system is further capable to assess the mobilization of hazard materials released into the environment, and it provides a wide range of applications in environmental science and technologies. A few points from my point of view concerning the challenges of future research in this area. We shall further study the dynamics and kinetics of trace elements, including their speciation under dynamic conditions, under changing redox conditions. And all this we should do in a very high spatial and temporal resolution. And important is, this is also underrepresented, those studies, we should link microbial and chemical processes in flooded soils and sediments. Very often we have some biogeochemistries, but when it comes to the elucidation of those mobilization processes, then it's very often very thin. So this is certainly room for further research in the near future. And when it comes to governmental issues or authorities, I'm also acting as advisor and consulting for some governmental authorities. Then important is no belittlement of when it comes to those contaminated sites. But on the other hand, we need a good balance. No panic mongering, a good balance between both. We definitely need an objective, and transparent politics of informations. And certainly as scientists, we need continuous monitoring and substantial research concerning those contaminated sites. My take-home messages are environmental pollution is an imminent problem of global scale, and the public awareness must be increased. This is also why we have workshops and conferences like this, but we also should work with TV and social media and so on to increase the public awareness. That means we also need to work on technical solutions, eco-technical solutions, nature-based solutions, all the whole bunch of solutions we need to exploit to fix that problem, and this problem is really urgent. And it's not directly linked to, but indirectly linked to my talk, circular economy is essential. And I would also like to draw your attention to very few reviews which are important from my point of view. This one about metal contamination and bioremediation of agricultural soils and food safety and sustainability, together with Professor Oak and Dan Alessi. And to this one, soil amendments, and this one is based about wood biochar for the removal of potentially toxic elements in water and wastewater. And here a review specifically dedicated to regulation limits worldwide, which is also quite important when it comes to regulations and to policy decisions. And here's one review which is dedicated to mercury, to cycling of mercury in the environment, sources, fate, and human health implications. And I published and edited also a few books. For instance, this one, Trace Elements in Waterlogged Soils and Sediments, Nickel in Soils and Plants, and also this book one, Soil and Groundwater Remediation Technologies. Few of the other editors are here in the audience, as well as Professor Oak, Daniel Sang, Philip Tuck, and Dee Ho and myself. And last year published is this book, Vanadium in Soils and Plants, and recently released is this one, Methyl Mercury Accumulation in Rice, just released a few weeks ago. And I thank you for your attention. And if there any questions arise, please feel encouraged to ask. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rinklebe, for enlightening us on soil and water pollution. Now we have our next speaker, Professor Lang Bing Huan, from the Sustainable Minerals Institute at the University of Queensland, Australia. He leads the Ecological Engineering in Mining program, which focuses on developing nature-based solutions for sustainable rehabilitation of mined landscapes. Today, he will be speaking on the topic, is the world's mining industry sustainable to meet the infinite demand for critical minerals in the new energy era? Let's give a huge round of applause to Professor Lang Bing Huan, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Professor Oak, organizing the talk. And critical mineral and rare earths is very trendy topic, pervasive in academic community, government, industry. The reason is with the whole world's transit into a new industry era of utilizing all these elements. So I don't have much answer here. I really try to bring the information together to highlight the challenges ahead. How can we make sure all the industrialized nation, or even the whole world going forward? So my topic is sort of challenging people's thoughts in government and industry. How can we make sure it's sustainable? I think the title looks a bit scary, but we do offer some hopes. And I draw a lot of information from online website, our own research experience, the past funding, industry projects, and my research groups. What do we need to sustain EV transition? We know there are two categories, elements people talk about, rare earths, the lanthanide group. It's like food spicy. You need a little bit to really make the property of material super strong, super tolerant to temperature. The another group is more and more born out the more recent geopolitics fight called critical minerals. Critical mineral is very arbitrary. It's any minerals critical national economy, national security, and national industry upgrading development. So it's very much defined by geopolitical willingness, I would say. For example, there's a recent strong campaign trying to add aluminium and iron ore into the critical mineral. The reason for doing that is try to elevate the government attention for policy favoritism. But adding geopolitical label for critical mineral can really limit your trading. So that's a really downside and danger. Copper, no doubt, is critical minerals. And I'm not going to read it through, but rare earths have a lot of needs in magnet of the wind turbine, into EV motors, etc. But very importantly to bear in mind is rare earths really rarely have high-grade deposit. It's often associated with a lot of mine waste, okay? And also, for example, like a lot of uranium deposit. There's a rock, uranium and cobalt deposit in northern China, in Mongolia. There's a heavy rare earths in southern China. There's a cation exchange capacity, cation exchange form. If you're interested, you can certainly go to read it up. Industry applications of critical minerals and rare earths. Here, I particularly use the example of cobalt, nickel, and copper. Copper is huge demand. Copper is actually much more valuable and indicative of world economy compared to gold. Gold is just something you lock up in the bank and you feel good. The industry application of gold is quite small. But copper has been used particularly in the EV motor because you need the copper coil to drive the motor. And in any of the EV vehicle, we have 2 to 4 motors driving each wheel. So the copper consumption is huge. And cobalt, nickel has been commonly used for cars, special steel. Cobalt's battery, okay? Any of solid state, long-lasting, long-capacity one, you need a lot of cobalt. The world needs a lot because the whole world facing what it called industry version number 4. And moving forward, try to get away or don't reduce the heavy reliance on fossil fuel. If you look at the trend, the copper, the battery sector needs a lot of cobalt, copper, lithium, nickel, and rare earths. And you look at the annual trading in energy-related critical minerals increased from 53 billion up to 378 billion, just merely in 20 years. That's a huge amount, okay? I would expect the whole pricing of all these minerals, I think it's going to be triple in the next 10 years because we need a lot of ore to satisfy that. And ore grades decreasing. And if you look at the importing of all this, it's actually related to the geopolitical repositioning of industry upgrading capacity. China is major hub drawing in the supply of cobalt, copper, nickel, lithium, all right? Because they basically jumped from nearly zero in the combustion engine driven industry development into EV development in a big goal they positioned 20 years ago. And you can look at the EV forecasted electrical vehicle sale. That's huge growth, okay? We have to remember this EV forecast is not just the pure electricity. It's actually fuel generator coupled EV vehicle. So the demand is huge, and the cobalt demand for rechargeable battery also increased a lot. So there's a global huge supply, and if you are in the futures trade, you have to really pay attention to this kind of, and copper deficit is looming. The calculation is based on the copper mining, and we call green copper supply or brown copper supply, okay? The green transition is really, really pushing these green metals, including, and copper is the largest demand. So in the eve of all this huge demand, we're having problems. The environmental impact of mining is huge. This is just purely a forecast of the cost by 20, so there's 50 million square meter, the 30% Earth's crust, terrestrial crust, is already impacted by mining, 30%. And out of 30%, there's a quarter of it is directly impacted on hotspot of biodiversity. Then there's a huge amount of ecology expenditure. Even just in Australia, you can see the next, by 2040, that's about 8 billion annual expenditure, $8 billion per year, okay? So the environmental cost, the society and the community have to bear to help this transition is huge. I think this is commonly not talked about in the economic discussion about industrial development. And copper production needed more, but copper ore grade declined in the 70s, anything less than 5% head grade. No one wants it. But now if the reserve's big enough, people mining 0.5%. Dashing copper is 0.255%. People still mining. As long as the volume is enough there, okay? What happened? The tailings amount is the largest contribution of tailings. You look at the, if you look at the contribution of different metals towards the copper is staggering. By saying that, a lot of these copper tailings and mine waste and rocks still contain residual amount of copper. So that trigger, and also if you look at the declared tailings dam storage around the world, it's only a third. Only a third of the total number. That's already a lot. We all know the Church of England is one of the largest investors in the mining sector. They demand the top 500 mining companies to declare where the environmental risk. So this is the distribution of the tailings globally. And if you don't manage it properly, you have this collapse. Okay, you have this iron ore tailings collapse. You have a lot of legacy of these mining pits. You have contaminated water in the United States back in the 80s. A lot of acid mine drainage, heavy metal pollution sent to all the rivers, lakes. So we really have to, when we're chasing this upgraded lifestyle, we're actually hurting the Mother Earth, and we're impacting our, like George said, that we have contaminated water, environment, and soil. What can we do? I mean, it's easy to scare people. What can we do? We always, I mean, humans are very tough. We're always resilient, which find a solution when there's a looming problem. Recycling is always straightforward. I think in Europe, China, Australia, the more and more attention is being put forward to recycling, and like copper recycling, battery recycling. Rare earth recycling is much more difficult and costly because the small amount distributed everywhere. And so we really need to push that. And the European market pushing the criteria for all the EV makers to recycle the battery. That's a good thing. And another thing is, this is enormous of interest now, it's e-waste, okay? The e-waste is an emerging industry technological development market. If you have someone invented the lithium recovery in e-waste, and it's stock listed. So it's very hot topic in the moment. There's all sorts of existing emerging technology to come. I think Professor Alessi will touch upon the lithium aspect. In Australia, also in Europe, I think reprocessing tailings, United States too, the historic legacy site tailings, it's also started gaining momentum. But there are challenges too. Some is regulatory challenge because tailings still classify as a mining loyalty, governed by mining loyalty. Second thing is, this technology and to reprocess, to convert the mineral form in the tailings need to be developed. So there's a lot of, if you look at the geoscience database Australia, you find a lot of quantified metal distribution in tailings deposit around Australia. How do we get them? There are some success stories, but mostly still in development. Waste rock, I mean leaching, hydroleaching, bioleaching of low-grade or waste rock has been practiced very well, especially copper recovery. In Dutch Copper, they have this asset platform to generate the leachate, which they use in hydrometallurgy and the electrical plating technology to recover it. So really, if we look at the whole technological future, the mining and any of the emerging innovation really have to aim to decrease the future footprints and impacts. How can we minimize the amount to be mined? But at the same time, we're going to reprocess, recover, recycle. Therefore, we're reducing the concurrent footprint and impact of the environment. Okay? I would expect the reprocessing tailings will significantly increase. E-waste recycling will be significantly increased. Even the landfill, we probably have to go back to landfill. Gallium, there's plenty of the landfill. Okay, in the old TV, plasma TV, etc. How can we get them back? And the mining new footprints should be decreased. I mean, one of the technology we have been developed to help reduce the footprint is like bauxite residual area. We try to develop nature-based technology to help alleviate the future environmental impact to make the mined landscape goes back to a more resilient ecosystem. I think I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Huang, for your talk on the global implications of mining industry and the challenges posed by the demand for critical minerals. Our next speaker, before we start the panel discussion, is Professor Daniel Alessi. Professor Alessi is the Encana Chair in Water Resources and a professor at the University of Alberta, Canada. His research expertise lies in the areas of aqueous geochemistry, water resources, and environmental geomicrobiology. Professor Alessi will be discussing developing a sustainable lithium supply to support the clean energy transition. Let's welcome him to the stage with a huge round of applause, everyone.
Thank you very much, and in particular, thanks to the organizers for the very kind invitation to come and speak with all of you today. Developing a sustainable lithium supply to support the clean energy transition is the title, and happily for me, my talk is in a great order. Professor Wang just did me a great favor by introducing the critical metals space, so that will allow me to move through my talk in a little more efficient manner. I'm from the University of Alberta, which is located in Western Canada, and I've developed what's called the Environmental Geochemistry Group laboratory, and so we focus on the surfaces of materials now and in geologic time, but in fact for the past 7 or 8 years, about 35 to 40% of my group has been focused solely on extracting critical minerals, and in particular lithium, from waste materials. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. But let me first put that into context. where does lithium as an example, or maybe the most prominent example of a critical mineral, where does it come from traditionally? Two places really. In South America, at the border of Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina, there are these in the very arid and sunny areas, salars, which are shallow salt lakes. And there are brines there, saline solutions that contain high concentrations of lithium, which are pumped to the surface. And you can see in the center there, they're evaporatively concentrated in these sequential ponds. The second source, they're located around the world, but the most prominent place there would be in Western Australia, is these hard rock mines, in the case of Australia, located primarily around Perth, from a type of rock that's called granitic pegmatites that contain up to single-digit percentages of lithium. And these rocks are crushed, which is CO2 intensive. They're extracted using acids, and then that is concentrated to make the two battery salts that I'm going to be talking about today, which is lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide. So these are the salts that are used to make EV batteries, cell phone batteries, you name it. Now, these type of mines, we saw in the previous slide, the salars, well, here's some open pit mines on the left in Australia, on the right in Africa. Both are lithium mines. It ends up that the one on the right in Africa also co-produces cobalt. But they have soil, land, and water degradation issues, and we've known this for a long time. And the issue is that even as these mines come online, Professor Wang talked about how hard it is to permit mines, or it was in one of his slides. Well, the rate of development or permitting of these sorts of mines, whether they be the salars or they be these hard rock mines, is simply not going to be able to keep pace with the lithium that we need, or the critical minerals that we need in the short to mid-term. So I would say that's the next 10 to 15 years. And so we're frantically looking for other sources, both because we just need them, but also hopefully ones that are more environmentally friendly than these sort of invasive processes that are illustrated in these pictures. And one of those in the case of lithium, and by the way, not only lithium, boron, bromine, there's several things that are contained in what are called sedimentary brines. So these are brines in deep sedimentary basins located normally several kilometers below the surface, oceans of water essentially located in these rocks that contain lithium but at very low concentrations, and other things, boron, bromine, and other elements. And so in this map we can see a map of global lithium, just published a couple of years ago. We can see Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. We know that now is those salars, those shallow salt lakes down maybe 100 meters or so. Australia, 6 million tons, that's hard rock almost exclusively. But if we look in, say, China, Germany, US, Canada, Mexico, these resources are primarily sedimentary brines. And they end up to be in the same areas normally, where we either do geothermal development, in the case of Germany, for example, or we do oil and gas development, and that would be, say, China and the US and Canada for sure, and Mexico. And so the question then is, fine, we have these vast resources, they're very big, but again, they're vast but low concentration. And if we can simply find a way to get the lithium out efficiently, cost efficiently, this could be a really good source in the short to midterm. So what we do when we develop oil and gas, well, oil and gas is located very commonly in these very same basins where we have these brines. And so one form of that that's expanded rapidly primarily in China and in North America is hydraulic fracturing, right? Where we take a fluid, starting in the bottom left, we put some chemicals in it to make it work better. We pump it down an existing well, that's the top center. And the point of pushing this water down at very high pressures is to fracture these rocks that contain oil and gas, so that the oil and gas can flow towards a wellbore more efficiently. Well, that water, when we release the pressure, is produced again, so it comes back to the surface, and a bunch of the formation water that may be hundreds of millions of years old, but that formation water will come back to the surface as well for many years, even decades. And again, it's this fluid that we normally in the bottom right there, we have to dispose of it. Well, we're already drilling the wells and all this stuff to produce the oil and gas. This fluid is coming to the surface for free. It's a really good potential source of lithium and other critical minerals. And so we published over the summer a review of all the oil and gas wells in North America, essentially conventional wells and those hydraulically fractured wells in red and blue respectively. And it's these 2.5 million wells, for example, in North America, other places in the world that are already producing these fluids. So not a great resource on face, but being produced for free as a waste. And can we somehow figure out how to get these out, right? Lithium and then other critical minerals. So my group for over a decade has been working with these brines. We have a specialized instrument on ICP-MS that we use to characterize in the upper right an example of a really complicated brine. So very saline typically. This one is 7 or 8 times the salinity of seawater. You can see it's messy, it's got a sediment. So they're not, again, an easy thing to work with. They're trying to strip a little bit of lithium out of a fluid that's pretty much a mess. And here again, you can see a very common lithium concentration, 55 parts per million. Keep in mind in a solar in South America, we would have 10 or 20 times, 30 times as much lithium. So it's not great. It's a technological or an innovative challenge here. What tends to work and what everybody is working on in industry and academia is what's called this general field of DLE, direct lithium extraction, which you may have heard of because it's gone into newspapers and common media. But again, very quickly, all we do is we get a brine source, could be from hydraulic fracturing. By the way, it could be a digested battery. So say we're doing battery recycling, we've got a mixture of many metals together from an acid digestion. Whatever it is, we have a fluid that contains some lithium. And in number 2 is what I'm working on, the extractive process. So we develop a material that could be a solid, it could be a gel, it could be an organic liquid, but some sort of a material that's very efficient at stripping lithium out of the solution while leaving everything else behind. And when we do that, when we strip the lithium out, we can throw the rest of the brine away that we don't want, and then we can recover that lithium in a small volume of fluid so it's concentrated and purified, and it's that concentrate, we call it, that can be sent off for number 3, the final purification to make the salt that is in this battery, lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. So the ones we're working on are the most popular or the most studied because they have high uptake and they're very rapid. They're called LMOs, lithium manganese oxides, and it's just this black powder you see in the bottom center there. So we make this powder in the lab from other salts. And when we do that, you get what we have in the upper left-hand corner. So this is sort of, it's called a spinel structure, but basically because there's lithium in it when we make it, it has these sites in it, these adsorption sites that are exactly the size of a lithium. And what we want to do essentially is use this black powder. Sometimes we can make pellets out of it, for example, but we want to expose it to a fluid like a brine, recover the lithium, throw the brine away, and then recover the lithium out of that. So we keep doing this cycle many times, 100, 200, 300 times to be economically feasible. And this essentially, it's a bit technical here, but it's the development of these very selective materials that's holding up this entire industry. If somebody would have figured this out, there's hundreds of billions of dollars worth of lithium in sedimentary brines. And so it's a problem that we're trying to look at. And the key problem here is that these sorbents degrade. So you see an example on the left-hand side. That's one of these minerals that we synthesize in the lab. It's at a very small scale, at the nanoscale. The green is the good stuff. That's the sorbent as we manufactured it. And the red stuff on the outside is the degraded sorbent. And every time we expose this material, that's a crystal, the green, every time we expose this crystal to a brine, it degrades. And so every cycle we lose more and more and more, and this is chemically, it's called reductive dissolution in the case of manganese. And these are the types of, I won't go into the chemistry here, but if we could stop this or slow it down so that we're able to use these, again, these materials, 100 or 300 cycles, we can finally have a business here, right? So we quickly, some things we're trying to test here, can we coat it? So we have this material that works really well. Can we wrap it in ceramics, for example? And so there's this one type of ceramics, zirconium oxides, that still permit, so let's say we take the material and we coat the whole thing with a thin layer of ceramics. It allows for lithium to get in, but it keeps all the other stuff away. And so things like dissolved organic carbon and hydrogen sulfide are what damages the sorbent. Well, if we can keep them away from the sorbent itself, then this might be a good technology. And so you can see sort of an example here. On the left, we have the sorbent without a coating. On the right, we've coated it with a ceramic. You can maybe convince yourself, it's not a great coating, it's a little bit heterogeneous in thickness, but you can maybe see a coating on the outside of the one on the right. And again, that's going to separate the solution or keep the solution away from and preserve or protect the sorbent. And indeed, we see that. So again, on the left, no coating. On the right, with the coating. The coating is the yellow there. And there's more degradation without the coating than there is with the coating. In fact, about 2 times as much degradation when we don't have the coating. And so what this has done effectively, the lithium uptake in both of these is about the same, which is good. But we've extended the life of this material by a factor of 2. So instead of being usable, in this case, for about 50 cycles, it's usable for about 100 cycles. Headed in the right direction. So that's option number 1, coat it. A little more expensive, got to figure that out, but that's one thing that can extend the lifetime. Number two is, you may not be familiar with cathodes and batteries, but they're also, this is all innovation. These LMOs, lithium manganese oxides, have been around for a long time because of the cathodes, again, in lithium-ion batteries. And what they do in lithium-ion batteries is they dope these materials. Professor Wang mentioned cobalt, but you can dope it with a bunch of things. Cobalt, nickel, in this case we chose magnesium. Why? Because it's cheap, it's benign, it's not toxic. And so what we did is we made a series, again, same minerals that we were talking about before, these lithium manganese oxides, but my student doped it with various amounts of magnesium, just like you would in a cathode of a battery. Why do you dope an LMO with magnesium or cobalt? To stabilize it. And in fact, that's what we see. So as we go from the left to the right, as we add more and more magnesium, the loss, the sorbent degradation goes down dramatically. And so it's working. It's beautiful data that shows a systematic stabilization of this material. Now, it's not all good news. Because the crystal becomes more stable, it can take up less and less lithium, so it becomes less efficient at lithium recovery. But fortunately, the rate of lithium uptake slows down sort of at a slower rate than the manganese loss. So we're seeing an increase, I would say, in efficiency when we dope it. So just another, is this the answer? I don't know, but it's another card that we have up our sleeves, another game that we can play. So the idea is maybe to combine some of these technologies. And the third one that we're very excited about, and I'll be done then, is we just started talking to biopolymer people. So I'm collaborating now with a couple people in engineering because it's not my specialty, but again, same material, lithium manganese oxide, that black powder, and in this case we're embedding it into polymeric membranes. And so we've done our first experiment just over the summer, and you can see some pictures on the left, just at about the micron scale, millimeter scale actually there. So you can see the membrane, that's the polymer, and these nanoparticles are embedded into it. And lithium uptake with and without the membrane is about the same. Little loss of efficiency, maybe 15 or 20%. But what's profound is when you embed the particles in this membrane, the loss of the sorbent goes down by 90%. So we're improving it by a factor of 10. So this goes from being good for maybe 50 cycles to 400, 500 cycles, and this is almost economic. And so we haven't optimized this, but I'm very excited about, and again, the reason here is that polymer, for those who might be interested, the polymer is hydrophilic, and so it keeps away the organics and things that damage the sorbent. And so we're trying to optimize this. We're trying to maybe combine it with the coated and doped materials. But if we can get this all to work, then we might actually be able to access those hundreds of billions of dollars in lithium that's in the brines. So I know the end here was a little bit detailed, but I guess for me the takeaway message is there's a lot of talk about ESG and all this stuff. There's the devil's in the details. Somebody's got to figure out how to make these materials work to recover lithium, recover boron, recover cobalt, all those things. And this is the type of sort of innovation that needs to happen. I would point out one thing, getting back to the original point of this session, so we can look at also, this coal mining, getting the lithium out of geothermal fluids or out of flow back and produced water. And I give a quick example of Costa Rica here because I was there last year teaching a field school. And I was tasked with giving a talk on all the geothermal, remember it's volcanoes in Costa Rica, but I was tasked on giving a talk on the geothermal history of Costa Rica at this field school. So I did that, and when I was preparing that lecture, there was a bunch of lithium data. So they had lithium data for every of the 12 geothermal plants in Costa Rica. And I started thinking, okay. So you can calculate, I won't bore you with the details, but you can calculate, knowing the concentrations in the fluid production, how many megatons of CO2 are produced or could be offset from extracting lithium. So if we were able to extract all the lithium every year from the geothermal brines in Costa Rica and use that lithium to replace hard rock mining lithium, which is about 15 tons or 15,000 kilograms, 15 tons per ton of lithium out of hard rock mining. It's very CO2 intensive. In Costa Rica, we would offset 24 megatons of CO2 per year out of the 38 gigatons that we produced last year. Yeah, okay, so that's not impressive, but Costa Rica is a small country. If you then extend that to all geothermal fluids that are being produced in the world, United States, Germany, all these, Canada, big production, you're getting on, that's an optimistic number, but it could be over a gigaton of CO2 that would be offset, again, by replacing hard rock lithium with geothermal lithium. And that is big. That's a single-digit percentage of the total CO2 production in the world. And so it's very exciting. And I wouldn't not just the CO2, but you can also see geothermal on the right, Hard rock on the left, underground reservoirs, that's poorly titled, that's the solars. Look at the difference in the use of water. So hard rock mining underground, the solars are much more water intensive. And back to the soil and land use, much less intensive because a geothermal plant just is a well on a well pad, a small well pad. Obviously the solars and the open pit mine have a much bigger footprint. So there's a real opportunity here not only to improve the CO2 footprint, but also the land, soil, and water impacts that we have. And I will stop there, and once again, thanks so much for the invitation to come.
Thank you very much, Professor Alessi, for your talk on lithium and clean energy transition. Now we will start the panel discussion and the Q&A session, which will go for 20 minutes. And I would like to invite Professor Ock to moderate the session. We would like to request from our audience to actively participate and interact with the speakers.
Okay, so we have panel discussion from now on. Because we have only 10 minutes, probably we will have more personal communication after the panel discussion, but I'd like to ask you to give any questions. So are there any question or comment from the floor? Any question or comment from the floor? Okay, Professor Gao.
I have a question to Professor Ricklin. I'm interested in phytoremediation. Do you think the global market is big? I mean, phytoremediation in global, is this can be used in real world, and the market is valuable?
Okay, what do you mean about phytoremediation?
Yes.
Phytoremediation, okay. Yeah, phytoremediation is a very cool technique, but several things which need to be addressed. First, very often phytoremediation needs to be applied, has a big advantage when you have large contaminations of large landfills. But the contamination should not be that high, should be small or medium contamination. If it's too high, then it works only for very special plant species. For instance, a very famous farm, which is a hypoaccumulator for arsenic, was discovered in Florida, for instance, but it's not so easily, you cannot easily adapt it to other continents, to other countries. So this is one problem. When you introduce some plant species which are hyperaccumulators, then you have the problem with adaptation, and which is also neophytes, which are not usually do not well adapt into the ecosystems of the local ecosystems. And other problems what you also have with phytoremediation in general is you have to harvest the plant. And at the end you have the plant. So what to do with the plant? So usually it's go to thermal usage, means you burn it, but then you need special technologies first to filter, to use the ash, and also special techniques for filter the dust and the air. And then you have a high concentration. The good thing is the plant is doing a good job to extract the toxic compounds from the soil, but then you have large volumes, you bring it down with thermal techniques to ash and dust, and this is what you have to bring finally on the deponey, and this is a disadvantage.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Professor Gao, and thank you, Jörg, for your kind explanation. So are there any question or comment from the floor? Okay, there's two. So could you please deliver the microphone to the left, and then we can move to the next. Thank you. Yes.
First of all, thank you for your amazing presentation. So my question goes to Professor Alessi. So I understand that it is in the still research stage, but I'm just wondering if this method could meet the increasing demand for the lithium if fully implemented, or similar methods could be apply to the other metal supply?
Yeah, so to the first question, it's definitely, so even if we brought all the sedimentary brines we have online using direct lithium extraction, I think we're looking at about a high single-digit percentage of the global supply. So important. I mean, 7 to 10% is important, but there's no universe in which we exist where we're still not doing hard rock mines and we're still not developing new ones and we're not bringing more solars online, which is happening right now. So the other big part that's quite important there, and I don't want to, Nan Sang here could probably answer some of the questions on that, is the separation of battery materials that can contain dozens of rare earth elements and critical minerals, and getting the lithium back out of those to get back into the supply chain. But yeah, so not the only solution, but definitely an important solution, and as I said, in sort of the 5 to 15-year time frame, I think. And the second part was, direct lithium direct extraction of other metals, absolutely, yeah. So it's normally going to be some sort of a precipitation chemistry, which would be for like strontium and barium, for example, would be separated by physical precipitation and then purified via cycling. There are direct metal extraction technologies for other metals that exist. It's just that a lot of those need to be optimized towards brine. So like what I'm doing is not invention. These LMOs, for example, have existed for decades. It's optimization so that they function in a fluid and economically. And I cut that slide from my talk, but economically is a huge word. You know, there might be you can dope something with antimony and it works 5 times better. It's like, I'm sorry, we're not producing 20 tons of sorbent with antimony doped into it because it's expensive and toxic, right? So it's a real world thing. There's things that are outside of the laboratory at a gram scale. It's at an industrial scale, which makes it fun but also really challenging. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to the next question. I think there was a question over there from the floor, and then Professor Yuan, and then B.
Thank you, Professor Daniel Alex. Your presentation is very impressive and rich of innovation. I noticed that one of your slides mentioned that the polymer embedded with the LMO, its recycling is very better, it's very good. So could you briefly what's on the line or which kind of method do you need to discover this?
Yeah, so what I didn't talk about, and I would have talked about in a conference presentation, is that so the sorbents are made out of manganese 4, which is the most oxidized form of manganese. It's insoluble, essentially. So it's manganese 4 oxide, the 4 valent state, I mean. If manganese is reduced to 3 or 2, those forms are much more soluble. And so what happens is, how do you get it reduced? Well, there's 2 things in a brine that can cause manganese in the sorbent to be reduced. One is organic carbon. So remember, we're getting brines from a hydrocarbon producing oil and gas wells, so there's a lot of dissolved organic carbon. And the second one would be if the well contains hydrogen sulfide, so in oil and gas terms, it's a sour well. Those things can cause the reduction of manganese. And then when you do the lithium recovery, you do that with a weak acid, it dissolves the sorbent. So every time you lose maybe 1, 2, 3% of the sorbent by this process called reductive dissolution. So the whole purpose of what I showed is like, how do we keep the organic carbon away from the sorbent? So that's part one. Why did the polymer work? Because those polymers, the one that I showed you is PVDF, so polyvinyl fluoride basically, and it's a hydrophobic polymer that, because it's hydrophilic, because it's hydrophilic, the oil and gas, the dissolved organic carbon stays away from it. And so basically it rejects or pushes away the organic carbon, which makes sure that basically the mineral, the LMO, doesn't see that organic carbon, it's not reduced. So what we showed you, that was a super low-tech experiment. We just kind of mixed it up in the lab and gave it a try, and it works really well. What we're doing is working with the polymer people, biopolymer in particular, to try to optimize that system to make sure we have the right flow rates and everything. But I'm quite excited about that one. I think it might actually work.
Okay, thank you. So could you deliver microphone over there at the back side?
Back. Yeah.
Excuse me? Hello? That's over there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My question goes to Professor Scott Chung. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation on biodiversity and how it affects for the soil chemistry and elements. I don't have any background about soil, but I would like to know you and your group's research on achieving UN SDGs, basically related to goals such as climate action or life on land, based on your presentation on biodiversity.
Sorry, can you repeat that last part again?
Yes, so I would like to know the impact of your research on the UN SDGs, because we want to achieve UN SDGs by 2030. So I would like to know, like, how far do you have to go to achieve those goals?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, very good question. I think in order to achieve our carbon neutrality, and I think hopefully that's what you were asking, I think everything counts. And so we are obviously looking at developing nature-based solutions to mitigate climate change. And what we find in our work is that maintaining biodiversity will play a really important role in increasing carbon storage in natural forest ecosystems. And obviously in Canada in particular, we have really large forested area. And so if we can increase biodiversity, through increasing biodiversity to increase carbon sequestration, then that can play a really major role in reducing climate change. So that, I think that those are some of the implications, but obviously it's really complex because how do we preserve the carbon that's accumulated in the forest ecosystem without having it lost through forest fire and so forth? So that's obviously another different question. Okay, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a question actually from our speakers, Professor Yang Ju-yuan.
Firstly, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. Actually, I would like to give a common question to you all. I want to listen to you all. Yeah, as you all know, in the last month, the Nobel Prize just announced the winners. So I think the big winner is for the AI, the artificial intelligence. So during the last day, the AI has been very developed in each research field. So I would like to know, from your opinion or perspective, what kind of the role of this AI or machine learning or the deep learning will be playing next 1 decade or 2 decades? And also another one question is, as several of you are serving as editor-in-chief of several top of journals, so is it the right time to propose a big or ambitious perspective on this point for our each research topic and related to the sustainability? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I think there are pretty typical questions to answer, but I will start from Longbin, and then we can have answer from each of the speakers maybe shortly, because we have lack of time and only 2 minutes left, but we can get insight from Longbin and Scott and Yoruk and then probably I can also talk about it.
From my perspective, I think, look, this day and age, there's a statement about every second how many gigabyte data has been generated in the world. I see AI is really very efficient, effective tool to join the dots of opportunities and identify the breakthrough need to be made. But I think we have to be careful. AI may not be able to generate the new knowledge for you. So we're still human to think. The AI is efficient tool to identify knowledge gap, identify opportunity for us to make next breakthrough.
Well, I agree with Longbin, and I think one of the biggest roles that AI can play is to improve our efficiency, right? Efficiency obviously is very important. Just like if we have machines, we can do a lot of things in a day, And if we are just doing it by our labor, we can't really only do so much in a day. So efficiency is really important. And as Longbin said, that AI can also help us to connect the dots and potentially generate new questions and so forth. So I think AI has a lot of potential in every discipline.
Yeah, I agree. Efficiency is one point, and we don't have to forget to think by our own. And I would like to add a few more points. One point is I see big advantage in bringing data together to be more efficient, and also bring data, scientific data together, but also industrial data together, to deal with big data sets, which is conventionally quite challenging or time consuming. So it will be quicker, it will be faster, and all this will be more on a global scale. So if I look in the future, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years, so meta-analysis, for instance, those things can be quickly done with AI. So it's it could be a very efficient tool, and could also enhance scientific exchange globally.
And I'll be brief. Yeah, I agree with what Professor Rinkleve said. I think one example of what he was talking about is materials optimization, whether that be water treatment. I talked about designing materials to recover critical minerals. I think there's a huge opportunity there. Yeah, certainly not to replace our brains with AI. I mean, I think there's got to be the rational scientist part of us, but to explore, say, synthetic mineral crystal spaces, which one is, you know, in theory, which one's going to work better for the recovery of this critical mineral, for example, or which material will work best to recover this pollutant from water. And I know, in fact, you've done some of that work, and I'm looking forward to your talk here in a bit. But to me, there's a huge space there to replace a lot of experimentation with perhaps some of these AI tools to help us explore more quickly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, so I think time is already over, so I'll give microphone to our moderator, Maishika.
Yeah, thank you very much all for the active participation in the panel discussion and the Q&A session. We will now break for coffee and resume our session at 4:20 in about half an hour. Let's grab some coffee and network. Thank you, and see you all shortly. Yeah, welcome back everyone. I hope you all enjoyed some good coffee and ready to dive into more of our exciting sessions. So we will now move on to our next talk. Our speaker is Professor Daniel Zhang from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. His research focuses on engineered biochar, waste valorization, carbon-neutral construction materials, and many more. Today he will be discussing sustainable soil management and urban farming in Hong Kong. Let us all welcome him to the stage with a huge round of applause.
Thank you for a kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation. Thanks to the organization and Professor Oak's kind invitation. So I'm very glad to be here. Today we would like to share with you some of our thoughts related to sustainable soil management and urban farming in Hong Kong. So one thing that has been our common interest and has been a long-term interest is about the carbon dioxide removal, CDR. And then one of the scalable way is using biochar and producing biochar and using it so that we can stop the carbon cycle and we can sequester more carbon dioxide from the emissions. So that has been a recognized approach that we can consider. And what we emphasize and what we are particularly keen is to apply it in the urban settings so that we can use it in our metropolitan cities, in the urban settings, not just limited to the remote area or countryside. So to integrate that, we think of the different approaches that we can utilize biochar in different ways, including like the urban agriculture, like the vertical greening, or maybe urban farming and the rooftop greening and so. And also we can support the other applications like the construction in the cities, so that we can offset the embodied carbon in the construction industry, and then we can integrate the carbon into the cementitious materials and the mineral mixture and the composite, so that we can introduce more carbon storage in our cities. And of course, we can also use it in environmental pollution control aspects, like with the wastewater treatment, and also with the remediation side, that with the brownfield redevelopment, as well as the municipal wastewater treatment, so that we can enhance the resource recovery process, producing more methane, for example, or maybe even we can produce hydrogen from wastewater or from food waste with the help of the biochar as a mediator or as a catalyst. And of course, we can also do like the other biorefinery or chemical conversion with the biochar as a carbon support catalyst. So there's a lot of different opportunities that we can use our carbon-rich materials in different settings for achieving the carbon dioxide removal and contributing to a number of SDGs. So today we particularly share our thoughts maybe in the urban agriculture and urban farming. So for using biochar enhancing our urban farming or agriculture, like vertical greening or rooftop farming, or even indoor farming, indoor agriculture, then we come back to the interplay of the biochar with the soil and the plant, which we have actually already have a lot of interesting talks and great insights from our other speakers today. So maybe I try to recap a little bit for the different details or different aspects that we may look into. So for the soil health, then we have physical parameters, we have chemical parameters, we have biological and microbiological parameters. So that is something we can characterize and we can enhance with the right choice of the carbon materials that you use. So remember that not every carbon is the same. Just like the activated carbon on the market, you have a lot of different types of activated carbon for different functions, for different applications. So biochar should be considered like similar, like the case as a commodity that has a different use, different functions. So that is serving different applications instead of just producing the same type of biochar for every different types of applications. So that would give you not the best result. So to customize our biochar interplay with the soil or to enhance soil health, so we may look into these different aspects and to enhance the physical parameters and chemical and biological, microbiological things, like the enrichment of the community and the fertility, like we already have in the fertility, like the phosphorus, the nitrogen and carbon cycles, and also we may have the utilization and the microbial enrichment and the species and the redox transformation of the redox sensitive minerals as well as the pollutants. So these are all related, so this is important. So speaking of the potentially toxic elements, in terms of the remediation, if you want to do it for like brownfield remediation for dispersed and decentralized low to moderate contamination in a large area, like the farmland or former brownfield, former industrial sites or garage and so, or maybe some sites near the industrial sites or plants, then it's important that we enhance the food security and the food safety. So to take care of the potentially toxic elements in the soil, and then we may be careful about the functions of our biochar materials with the functional groups and the interplay with the minerals, and especially with the redox sensitive transformation of the pollutant itself as well as the minerals. So the redox state can change and the crystallinity can change. And when they change, there will be different implications on their mobility and bioaccessibility. So that means they will change the possibility of those pollutants to be immobilized, to be safe, or to be mobilized and accessible to plants, and eventually end up in food chain. So there's actually quite different scenario. So we have to be careful about our soil chemistry to make sure that we get the right species. Like in the different redox conditions, we may have different form of the thallium or different form of chromium. So actually that would have a different toxicity and different mobility. So that would be changed with our biochar dosage together with the minerals. And then other than the transformation of the redox with the pollutants, potentially toxic elements, then what about the organics? Like in urban farming, we always use different kind of like bio-based fertilizers, or maybe we use manure to replenish the fertility to enhance the utilization of the nitrogen and phosphorus and carbon. But then with those bio-based fertilizers or organic farming, there's a concern that those manure or wastewater from livestock waste contain antibiotics. Because we have a very intense livestock farming to give us enough food, so we use a lot of antibiotics. And antibiotics end up in the farmland, or maybe will enter our food train. So actually with the biochar that we can effectively absorb the antibiotics. And to understand that, we actually try to learn from the AI. We've learned with the AI and utilize the data that we have in the literature already. So we conducted machine learning and used different algorithms, and like the random forest and also gradient boost tree, to analyze the results and look at the parameters. So for the machine learning to give us information, so we try to identify the parameters that are important. So that is something we want to understand the issues, the rooms that we can pay attention to, and we can do a better job. And we look at it in a more microscopic way. So in the previous studies with the machine learning, they may just look at the bulk parameters with the surface area, with the total content of carbon or oxygen. While in our case, we would like to break it down to more details. So we look at the more microscopic distribution of the pore size and the surface area in different pores. And we look at the different functionalities with different oxygen groups and nitrogen groups and also carbon bonding, so that we want to link them up to see what are the important parameters that would help the absorption of the antibiotics, so that antibiotics will not be accessible anymore. And also beyond the antibiotics, there are pharmaceuticals as well, so PPCPs. So we look at those personal care products, and we in this another study, we specify further for the data of the carbon functionality with the XPS data in the literature, so that we can understand which functions of the biochar in terms of the carbon structures and the oxygen functions or oxygen moieties or nitrogen moieties would be important. So not just the total content, not just the total surface area, but also the chemical information to tell us more details, so that we can develop better knowledge from those AI analysis. And we realize that actually that is like the bonding structures will be quite important to enhance the hydrophilic PPCP's absorption. And other than the pollution control, then what else, like in the soil health, we may need to enhance the carbon cycle, and also in a way like with the dissolved organic matter. But then dissolved organic matter on one side is enhancing the soil fertility, while on the other side it may be potential implications to the environmental safety or subsequent reactions. Because with the dissolved organic matter, they may carry pollutants along and disperse it for a long distance, so become a facilitated transport. And also dissolved organic matter itself may be facilitating redox reactions, and they may generate radicals, and they may induce other phytosensitive reactions, so that may generate some oxidative stress or potential toxicity. So actually, the dissolved organic matter is a very interesting part that we can pay more attention to, and also look further into their characteristics and their fate and transformation. Because with different dissolved organic matter from the biochar or from the carbon or bio-based materials we use, they may have actually quite a diverse implications. Some could be directly used, easily biodegrade, to be used as an organic carbon, as a carbon source. Some are actually not that easy to be degradable, to be accessible, to be usable. So that may become more like a macromolecule that may be more recalcitrant and stay longer in the environment. And then with those, if they carry some redox sensitive functions, or if they carry some phytosensitive functions, that may have implications on the fate of the pollutants as well as the environmental health. And then speaking of those potential toxic considerations, so radicals is one of the things that we get to do a better job. Again, on one side, radicals can be useful. So if we generate radicals on purpose, we can use it to support our advanced oxidation purpose. So we can support our degradation of those organics, of antibiotics, or of PBCPs. So we can use the radicals in a positive way. But if we generate it and let it persist in a way in the environment, that may result in some negative consequence with the oxidative stress and also the toxicity or effect to the microbes or to the plants. So the radicals, whether it's generated in different forms of radicals, whether it's an oxygen center or carbon center, or whether it's stimulated with different minerals, with iron, with copper, with zinc, or else, that would be important to understand. And so there's an interplay, coming back to interplay between the carbon and the mineral to begin with, and then all the downstream process would have different implications, which we can characterize better. So coming all this, we would like eventually to enhance the food security and food safety. So if we take care of all these physical, chemical, microbiological, and plant parameters well, and with the support of the top-down analysis with machine learning and also bottom-up hypothesis-driven investigation, eventually we can enhance the crop yields and then to make the crops safer and free of contamination as well. So with all these understanding and knowledge that we generate with research, we are very keen to translate our technology and knowledge to the industry. Like our other speakers mentioned, it's very important to actually apply and then transform our industry practice. So we communicate and work with the industry and the government a lot over the years. And one of the examples is we work with the local developers and the NGOs, and also with the support of the government. So we contribute to some urban farming and rooftop farming tests, field tests and field demonstration together. So we plant different types of crops, edible crops, and will be consumed with the residents. So we can see that how do we compare our performance with the biochar and compost, and compare to the organic fertilizer like the chicken manure, and also with the control, and then whether we can do a better job or we can be comparable in terms of the crop yields and so, and then the fertility of the soil health, and we can see that some crops will be actually better enhanced by the biochar supported fertilizers, while some may be just comparable. So it depends on the requirements of the plant. So we have to know better of our plants as well, because different plants, different crops, obviously they need different nutrients, and they need different combination of the environment and the physical and chemical parameters in the soil to support them. But one thing that is interesting is with the manure as an organic fertilizer, we see that at some point there's some disease and also interference with the insect. So that could be a concern when we use a biofertilizer, because that may eventually, without the pesticides or use or other control, that may be difficult to maintain the same quality over time, because with the bio or organic fertilizer, they may come with different quality. But then with our treated biomass and biochar supported fertilizer, then we will be free of this kind of issues. So this is the issues we observe with the chicken manure. So eventually this pot has to be stopped because of the contamination by the insect. So with this, thank you very much for the time.
Thank Thank you very much, Professor Sang, for your fascinating talk on sustainable soil management and the future of urban farming. Our next speaker is Professor Shangzhou Yuan from the School of Energy and Environment at Southeast University, China. His research focuses on carbon dioxide capture and utilization, engineered biochar, and the circular economy, among many other areas. Today, he will be speaking on the topic Machine Learning Guided Engineered Biochar Materials for CO2 Capture towards Environmental Sustainability. Let's welcome him with a huge round of applause, everyone.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And also, I sincerely thank you, Professor O, for your kind invitation. Actually, 2 years back, I'm still working in Professor O's lab as a research professor. And after that, I moved to the Southeast University, which is located in Nanjing. Started my new career as a youth chair professor. Now, in my group, I have 3 PhD candidates and also 3 master candidates. We are working together to move forward under the guidance of these distinguished speakers together. So today, I'm going to talk about the machine learning guided engineered biochar for CO2 capture towards environmental sustainability. Actually, as you can see, I also list Professor O here together with me because many of these works we done together to make it published. So as mentioned during last panel discussion, as we know, the AI have developed so much. Actually, just 70 years ago, which the day marking the birth of AI. And here we may need to know one person is Hinton, as we can see in 1986 and also 26. They developed the more knowledge on the AI and also published like the breakthrough article in Science and put forward the concept of the deep learning for the first time. And in this year, last month, also the Nobel Prize was announced. Here I just list the main information about the AI. We can see for this year, the Nobel Prize, the big winner is AI, especially for AI godfather is Professor Hinton. As we can see in this physics and chemistry, there are 2 to 5 people, and 3 out of them are related to the AI or machine learning or deep learning. So, so we can say the big winner is AI. So here I would like to introduce in the last 4 or 5 years in our group we did a lot of research related to the machine learning or AI. As we can see, we published we applied the machine learning to predict the CO2 absorption using the biochar, and also we can predict the soil heavy metal immobilization by biochar. And for the biochar aiding effect on the nitrous oxide, and also we further developed the models to for the active learning, the based guided synthesis of engineered biochar for CO2 capture. And also we have chance to talk about the recent advance and the main existing challenges for applying machine learning in our environmental sustainability field. So today I will just select some of key research which is related to machine learning. So firstly, I would like to introduce the background about the CO2. So as we can see, and the CO2 concentration is increasing steadily, now even up to 420 ppm. And also the annual growth rate is also keep increasing. It's up to 2.4 or 2.5 ppm per year. So based on kind of this background, the CO2 capture is essential to mitigate climate change. And in 2020, the President Xi Jinping announced for the carbon neutrality and carbon peaking. As we know, that China is the largest CO2 emission countries, which accounts for the 1/3 of the total emission in the world. So it's really challenge for China to achieve this kind of the carbon neutrality by 2060. In the below, we can found there two fingers. We can see here the main thing is the CCUS will play a significant role in for achieving the carbon neutrality, and also we can found that the top 5 countries with CCS project in last year. The first is US, the second UK, and Canada, followed by China and Norway. And so we can see that China is also developing more and more CCS project to achieve carbon neutrality. As we know, the biomass is the most abundant renewable carbon resources of 170 billion tons globally, which is capable of replacing the fossil resources. And here I just list the China and Korea as an example. So in Korea, it's 40 million tons annually produced. In China, it's 900 million tons produced. So for the CO2 emission reductions, we have a huge amount. Actually, we know the biomass is really a carbon resource, so we can convert the biomass into the biochar or hydrochar, and also the porous carbon, so we can do for the environmental protection, like gas capture, wastewater purification, and the soil amendment. And also we can use for the energy storage and converting, like a fuel cell, battery, and supercapacitor, and also catalysis, which are beneficial for achieving several of the UN SDGs. As a study, we searched the CO2 capture and the waste as the key keywords based on the Web of Science database. We found that the CO2 capture is recently mainly investigated by the adsorption, which using the active carbon or porous carbon. Because the main reason is the porous carbon-based adsorption has several advantages, like it's cost effective and mild operating conditions, high deployment feasibility, and also low energy consumption. Because as we can see this figure, the temperature range for achieving the adsorption desorption is in a relatively low temperature range. Here I just show briefly how to convert the biomass into biochar and even porous carbon, because biochar or hydrochar is not well developed with the porous structures. Generally, we need to do further activation using the chemicals or physical agent to further increase the surface area and micropore structures. And then for the CO2 capture performance, we mainly consider the CO2 uptake, CO2 selectivity, and the regeneration conditions, and cyclic stability. Actually, we use the different kind of biomass and even plastic as a feedstock to prepare the CO2 adsorbent. We can, after performing the detailed experiment study, we figure out the micropore, which is less than 0.0 nanometer, which is very effective for capture CO2 gas. due to the time limitation, I just briefly go through several case studies. We developed the porous carbon from the PET plastic and use the different activation method like one pot synthesis or two pot synthesis use different chemical agent. And also we performed the life cycle and techno-economic assessment for this whole process based on this industry scale. All of the data is from our experiment, but we use the Aspen Plus to scale up. Like we can see, this is 1,000 ton. This is 1,000 kilogram per hour for treating with the PET. This kind of system. Here, main conclusion is we found that environmental benefit and economic feasibility of this approach. We highlight it as a multifunctional alternative to conventional CO2 absorption and also plastic waste management technologies. And as a case study, I just show, we also convert this kind of food waste into the CO2 absorbent. And we performed the life cycle based on the different system boundary. We found that it is a promoting technical route to mitigate climate change and also achieve a waste to resources strategy. Up to now, I introduced the background how we convert the biomass into the porous carbon for CO2 capture. We can see we need to do the carbonization and we need to do the activation and even we need to do the functionalization. So for each step, we have several parameters to be considered, like the heating temperature, resist time, and which kind of chemical engine should be used and how much we need to use. So when we treating this lot of parameters, it's really a labor-consuming and a time-consuming process. That's the reason why we think about machine learning, why we use machine learning to help us. So here, as we know, the machine learning is one data-driven approach. The first step, we need to collect the data from the published papers. In this work, we collected over 600 data points. But you know, when we collecting the data missing is always occurred. So we just discard several data points. Finally, we use 527 data points, and 85% of used as the training data. The 15% was used for tests, the models. In this research, we found that the GPT model has a very good prediction performance to show us to figure out the absorption parameter, texture property, and composition properties in the orders for the biomass developing the porous carbon for CO2 capture. And also we think about the AI is more powerful, not only providing the performance prediction, but more important, they can help us to design the exactly CO2 absorbent. So we do further, we like the active learning loop, like given here, we performed 3 iterations, means the model guidelines, and also we perform the experiment to validation. After that 3 circles, we found that we conclude that this machine learning based this approach can help us to develop the high performance engineered biochar with enhanced CO2 uptake, and also can broaden the application as a functional materials. And to further introduce the novelty of this work, we can see the modeling, currently the modeling publication is mainly shown in these figures. And for our work, we are at currently this stage. I think we are unique. So that's why the editor-in-chief just provide the front cover for this paper in the ESNT. And also we can see this predicted data and experiment data is well matched. So that means our model is better to provide the key information for materials design. But we're also facing the several challenges. The first one is the data set. As mentioned, the data set currently for previous study are quite small. So this is the key issues. And also the second one is previously we collect all data just by ourselves. So it means we may make some new errors during this data collection. This is will brings us wrong direction. So when we use the machine learning, we should carefully think about this: which kind of data could be usable, and which kind of data should be discarded. The third one is, in addition to the performance prediction, more investigation should be conducted to investigate the feature importance, especially for the internal relationship between the materials and the application performance. And the last one is developing the predictive models is just the first step. And the more important and interesting thing is to apply the machine learning model to design specific adsorbent and adsorption parameters with aim of the adsorption CO2 in specific scenarios. So this is the last slide. I just want to give a summary. I use this kind of as a case study. We can upcircling the biomass, different kind of waste into the post-carbon for the CO2 capture, like the temperature swing adsorption or pressure swing adsorption. And during this process, the machine learning can help us to design exactly the CO2 adsorbent, and also to get us how to optimize this whole system. But by the way, as we are now mainly consider the environment sustainability or the carbon neutrality. So we'd better further to do the life cycle assessment for over all this system. So I would like to stop here. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yuan, for your engaging talk on machine learning and carbon capture for environmental sustainability. Our last speaker for today is Professor Philippe Tan, a full professor at the Green Chemistry and Applied Technology Department at Ghent University, Belgium. His key research focuses on metal contamination, phytoremediation, and phytostabilization of contaminants. Today he will be speaking on assessing soil amendments for metal immobilization in laboratory tests, choosing appropriate endpoints. Let's welcome him to the stage with a huge round of applause, everyone.
Hello everybody, thank you for this welcome to this last presentation of today, which will focus a little bit on what we all need in soil management, and that is characterization. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific than the previous speakers, but I will stay more general in terms of the specific content. It's just that I want to more pass a general message on how we should work with indicators of, in this case, metal immobilization, and interpret them in a way that is more relevant to actually the final application. And so the context is the soil contamination, where we have all these pollutants that come into our environment, and in particular then the diffuse contamination. This is probably one of the bigger problems contamination over larger areas, lower levels of contamination. Trees do not necessarily die. In contrast, sometimes the ecosystems that are there are flourishing unless you go measure the metals, see the high concentrations, measure biological endpoints, see the stress on ecosystem and organisms. And there you are dealing then with sites where it is not anymore possible to come in with conventional techniques, clean up, do massive interventions because the areas are too large and the contamination levels are too small. So one more realistic approach to work with such areas, especially if we want to use that land, continue to use that land for beneficial uses, is to use soil amendments to just reduce the flows that are naturally happening in soil ecosystems. In natural soil ecosystems, metals will be cycling, metals will be taken up, and that's normal. Metals are a natural part of our environment. We should never forget that. Metals are bio, yes, but too much metals is not good. And if we have these soils that are affected by diffuse contamination with too high loads, we want to attenuate these metal cyclings, and we are indeed searching for many years for amendments, and biochar in this context also is a very actually promising amendment, but there is still a lot of bottlenecks before we can apply this. But the ultimate aim is there indeed to protect population. So it's not enough to do tests and then see an amendment that performs best and say, oh, we are there. No, we have, and this is the main message I want to give, we have to put more emphasis also in our research papers to what level do we actually reach. We can indeed reduce, but is the reduction sufficient on its own to come to ultimate protection? And obviously also we should then be able to predict whether our treatment is going to last a bit longer, because if you are working with an amendment that lasts only for a very short time, it will involve reapplication, disturbing your site frequently in the future, so that's also not what we want. And so ultimately you have this source receptor pathway, which is what determines the hazard to target people and environment, if this pathway is there. And what we need to achieve in soil management is just to break that pathway, and the minimum acceptable solution is the pathway might still be there, but we need at least to shield, to protect environment and people, wider environment and people from hazardous effects. So we cannot use the best amendment, even if it reduces mobility by 90%, if that resulting lower concentration is still far above levels that are safe for the environment. And typically in publications, in evaluations, this aspect is hardly addressed, this absolute aspect, this absolute target that we use. The second example, we cannot use the best amendment, even if it reduces plant uptake by half, if what remains in the plant is still a problem. Reduction can be good and can help, but if it's not enough on its own, it could be useful in the context of other measures, but it's not a solution on its own. And too frequently we see publications where they say, we found it, we have this amendment, but that's only half of the story. So we need indeed to look at absolute levels, stay below certain exposure levels. Just improving is not enough. We need, in the end, hard evaluations with absolute concentrations and absolute exposure assessments resulting from our treatments before we can decide whether we really have amendments as the solution, as the only solution for a certain case. So we are hard testing and developing amendments on different soils, different amendments on different soils. So there's a multitude of things that play there with so many factors that it is difficult or impossible to model it just from a few key parameters. So we need to go in each time and do the testing. So that testing, that's of course the question, how do you do that? There's a lot of tests to be done. One part of these tests should be quick, because we should have quick answers whether what we are trying will help in this particular situation. And indeed, there I can make a link to the previous speaker. This is somewhere where indeed also machine learning will be a future help in more quickly be able to evaluate quick test results. In order to check, are we good? Then we could go to bigger production and attempt field application. If not, we just need to recycle, need to go again in the loop again and start again, return the cycle. And this should be fast. We should be able to come sufficiently fast to a solution by each time being able to test the product quickly, have quick answers. And there we are then facing with, indeed, we intend to apply something in the field, and there it's for years. There's a multitude of variable influences. Long-term effects are also playing there. An important aspect which is so difficult to assess in field and long-term experiments is indeed the natural aging processes, which usually forcibly are in our favor. Usually aging results in an overall decrease in mobility. That's what thermodynamics also dictate. But nevertheless, yeah, we need, before we apply really for real, we need also field tests, which are complicated, expensive, involved, take years. So we need to start with laboratory tests, which are simple, which are short term. So more elaborate testing is then some tests in the lab that still take more time, but that give us a more accurate, but more close answer to what might be expected in the field. But it requires incubation your mixtures. You cannot just mix and immediately test, because a very important aspect also of amendments is they come into the soil environment and there is some kind of interactions and equilibrium taking place. So an equilibrium phase needs to be respected. That is at least weeks, but preferably months or even a year, before you can really be sure about your endpoints. And then column tests are probably the most valuable tool to predict and extrapolate leaching that you could later expect when applying this same amendment in the field situation. And these are all much more elaborate tests. We don't have time for these tests if we are just still in the early phase where we are looking for the ideal combination of soil and amendment. So we also need the quick tests, and we cannot avoid, I guess, to work with a tiered approach where we have quick lab screenings that give us a rough answer, and then have longer lab tests to confirm the quick answers and give more certainty that once we move that to the field, that yes, it will effectively work. And so these quick tests are what we need in the very short term for very quickly being able to have feedback on our testing. And you see here several methods listed that are commonly used in literature to physico-chemically test the availability, mobility of metals, water-soluble concentrations from extracts, which is in fact the most relevant indicator of the actual hazard. I will go a little bit into the DGT, which is a technique that in addition also gives us some idea about kinetics of release. There are single extractions being developed for already many, many years, and which are valuable in certain contexts, but none has a universal value, can be generalized universally. Single selective extractions with more concentrated reagents will then increasingly give bigger pools that are released in certain conditions, but increasingly also decrease the direct link with actual hazards, consecutive single extractions and sequential extractions ultimately. So single extractions are speedy and simple. Probably most relevant is really to work with soil solution sampling, and there the horizon sampling is a very quick tool actually. The Rhizon is this little device which is equipped with a 0.45 micrometer filter, and you put it into your soil. You need to saturate your soil, wait a little bit, and then you can extract solution that is really quite representative for the soil solution, and this way have a quite good idea of what soil solution concentrations might become if you apply an amendment in the field. And this is here an experiment where a control soil in red was treated with different amendments. On the one hand, the compost in the green, peat in the brown lines, and the blue lines there are biochar, each time in 2 different rates. And you see in our case here, both peat and compost make the situation worse. Soil solution concentrations increase. Peat, on the other hand, improves the situation over several years, where you need to go to the highest dose, up to 4%, to have even more decrease. So indeed, in this test, you could say 4% is the best, so we are there. No, we're not there. If you look at the concentration levels, we're working with cadmium. We're still there around 15 to 20 microgram per liter, so that is still huge. Microgram per liter, but it's huge. Environmental cadmium concentrations are below 1 microgram per liter in a clean soil. And these higher concentrations, up 5 already, has been shown to already stress plants. Not really toxicate them, but already stress plants. So these are already concentrations, low as they are, difficult they are to measure, they are environmentally highly relevant. And another tool that I think is very useful in this context is the diffusive gradients, which works with, like you see on this graph, you see the device on the left, and on the inner side you have this gel there, which is a strong ion exchanger, so it will strongly bind metal cations that then diffuse from the solution onto the gel. So you see there on the picture, totally on the left, the resin, the sink of the metals from the soil solution, and you see then the diffusive gel, and then on top where it says distance, there you have then the surface of the DGT. So what does that mean? The soil solution comes into contact with the DGT, and in the DGT metals will be sorbed by the gel, so there will be a diffusion gradient that is established. And this is a conceptual diagram that gives you 3 possible scenarios. The one is the fully sustained case, and that means that the concentration at the surface of the DGT is continuously replenished by the soil system. So that means diffusion goes on, metals are sorbed, but metals are replenished so fast that the concentration at the surface of the DGT, and we call this the CDGT. On the next slide, we will use that. That concentration remains. That's very exceptional, because normally the diffusion is so strong that concentration at the surface will already be lower, so the diffusion gradient will extend beyond the device, like in the partially sustained case, and so you will see a concentration at the surface, a CDGT, which is lower than that of the soil solution. And in the fully unsustained case, it will be a very long diffusion gradient. And so DGT gives this extra information. You can measure your soil solution concentration, but with DGT you can also measure what will be the concentration that develops at the DGT, and this is a measure of the extent by which the soil system can replenish the solution or not. And this gives then nice concentration data like this. We focus in on, for example, cadmium, where we see that from 33 in the soil solution, just the concentration you measure in the bulk soil solution, with biochar we go to 26, and with the highest rate we go to below 20 microgram per liter. The second row is then the CDGT, so that is the concentration that develops at the surface of the DGT. So if you read papers about DGT, there is a calculation to deduce the CDGT concentration, so the concentration at the surface from the measurements. And this is also decreasing. And the last line, C effective. C effective is the concentration that would give the same CDGT provided there was no solid buffering phase. If there was no soil but pure solution, you would need 160 microgram per liter cadmium in the solution to have an 11 microgram at the surface of the sensor. That is that C effective. That is if there is no soil that is capable of replenishing the solution, if there is no replenishing capacity. So with a very high concentration, you need a very high concentration to have this 11 at the surface, whereas with the soil you only need the 20. You only have the 26, which already gives us effect because this solid soil is continuously replenishing. And this indeed gives a more shaded measure even of, we see then the before result in the 17, which is what is effective, but also manages to decrease seriously the buffering capacity of the soil. So, some concluding remarks. Lab testing yields a coarse approximation at best, and a tired approach of quick tests and longer tests is needed for practical reasons. Quick tests to quickly be able to optimize, longer tests to confirm. And soil solution concentrations are what matters first. This gives you the idea of the immediate impact, and come longer term effects. And ultimately, we always require field testing before applying in the real scale. And something I didn't touch into detail, but it would be good if we have also more standardization in such approaches. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tak, for your insightful talk on soil amendment and metal immobilization. Now we will start the panel discussion and the Q&A session, which will run for 30 minutes. I would like to invite Professor Yuan to moderate this session, and I also would like to request from our audience to participate actively and interact with the speakers.
Okay, now we will start our panel discussion. I'm so honored to chair this session, and I'm also so lucky to be involved in this event. And thank you again, Professor. Yeah. So is there any question from floor? Yep.
Yeah, I have a question for Professor Tak, actually. So really interesting points about not remediating a site if it doesn't meet a criterion, right? If it doesn't meet a safe criterion. In Canada, I'm not sure if it's the case in Belgium or Europe, but in Canada we have all these really, really old metrics for metals and soils that are absolute concentrations. And of course, if you look at like mercury, right, if mercury is an example, absolute concentration of mercury versus the methylation of it, there's huge differences in actual toxicity. I'm just curious what you think about, like, where do we need to go in regulations or research in terms of differentiating the old school kind of absolute concentrations of chromium, mercury, all those sorts of things, and maybe moving towards a toxicity-based sort of metals assessment in soils?
Yeah, you're touching indeed a special element, the mercury, and there this, and also for arsenic is the same. The form is there critical in determining further toxicity, but I think it's not the first criterion to consider. So the first one is indeed, in my opinion, concentration total in the soil, of course, which gives you the trigger, there's something going on, but then also soil solution concentration, that gives you the most direct measure of direct possible hazards. And yeah, in the case of mercury, differentiating there between organic, which is much more toxic, and inorganic, if it's there already, if it's not toxic, maybe by migrating it will become toxic. So I will find it dangerous to too much differentiate there in first instance between the speciation that is there. It could be a criterion maybe to decide, okay, this site, I have many sites, and this site where it's mostly in the less toxic form than in the other, let's first go for the other. But never, I think, even as a criterion to be more lenient on a site, because yeah, speciation can change, and if the mobility is there, the metal can move to target environments where it could become toxic.
Thank you.
Professor O.
I just have a comment to the question from Professor Alessi, because this is indeed the key question. Yeah? Of course, the first thing is always to determine the total content of the element of target, and then I know in Europe and the States and Canada, all risk assessments are based on EPA, on calculations, okay, which are very thoroughly done, very thick material. And it gives certainly for a first quick evaluation some good results. But it reflects only the total content. And this is, of course, not sufficient, which Professor Tak mentioned certainly. So that's why the demand is always to say, okay, we need at least one indication for kind of when the element goes into solution, at least one. Either it's water or salt or EDTA or whatever. But even then, it's one value, which reflects, if you have dynamic conditions, it's go up and down. So this is, in best case, it reflects only the mean, in best case. But very often, it does not. And just an anecdote for our younger scientists, very often I get papers, okay, we determine the total concentration in area number X, and we did the risk assessment using EPA. That's it. So usually this is not enough in terms of papers, because risk assessments, this is more like a report and it's not really research. The key point is always to say, okay, when a metal or element of target becoming mobilized goes from the solid phase into the liquid phase. And then when it's come to specific elements such as arsenic or you mentioned mercury, then it becomes much more complex. That's why I'm very thankful also to Professor Zhang, because you mentioned the role of dissolved organic carbon. When it's come to mercury, then it's like this small, very little concentration of mercury can be very toxic. And this is an example where the risk assessment based on total concentrations is almost useless. Because first, because of the interaction between mercury and dissolved organic matter, which has a very high affinity, but dissolved organic matter also enable mercury to methylate. And then you have CH3 groups, and this is far more toxic for all organisms, because we can see, okay, outside is sweet, but inside is poison core. So in terms of mercury, arsenic, and some other elements, it becomes much more complex. And we need further studies on the interactions between dissolved organic carbon and elements, for instance, mercury. So just comment about this dissolved organic carbon. Sorry, it was not a question, very long comment. Sorry.
Is there a question from floor?
Well, I have a quick question for Professor Chen. I guess Hong Kong, we all know that Hong Kong has really limited land available. I guess most people live in apartments and so forth. So what is the policy in Hong Kong for encourage urban farming? And I have a quick question for Professor Yuan as well. I guess you posed a question about AI application. So I would appreciate if you can share, because you've done a lot of AI work, can you share your experience, where are we going in AI application in your part of the research?
Thank you, Professor Chan, for your question. So Hong Kong, like maybe Seoul as well, as densely populated. So we are having residents in high-rise buildings, residential buildings. So we have limited space for urban farming or for conventional farming. But that is important to contribute to the behavioral change and the appreciation to the natural environment. So it's more important to contribute to the ESG. Rather than just the food production. So it's more important to change behavior, to give people a sense of what ESG and then the company can contribute to ESG in terms of the urban farming or vertical greening to be more climate resilient and also more self-sufficient in terms of the food produce or crop use. However, the absolute amount is not enough for self-use, for just by urban farming and indoor farming. Maybe a couple of percent would be more realistic. But then let me give you an example, like in Singapore, they're more aggressive. They actually want to be 30% by 2030. So there's much more aggressive in Singapore about the urban farming. They want to produce 30% of their food crops by urban farming within their country by 2030. So that could be aggressive goals and that could be realistic, we hope. But then in Hong Kong, maybe a couple of percent would be more realistic. But then the contribution to the behavioral change and ESG and the carbon footprint and the climate resilience, it would be, and also biodiversity as well. So related to the biodiversity richness, like in your talk, so with more microclimates or more green space, that would actually be good for our biodiversity inside the urban settings as well. Thank you.
Can I ask a question for follow-up with? Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much, Professor Chang, for your question. Actually, I'm still the beginner to use AI, especially for the machine learning to accelerate our research in the environmental protection or environmental remediation. As far as I know, I think the main challenge is just the data. So because when we select the data or collect the data, we found some data in this paper, but we cannot find the same data in another paper. So the first thing I think we need to propose, just for example, for the CO2 capture, the CO2 solvent, what kind of parameters should be included in each publication. So in the following 2 or 5 years, all of these papers can contain those information. So we can quickly build up the data set. There is no more data missing issues. So this is I think the key point to accelerate the AI or machine learning to accelerate our research. The second one is, I think machine learning is just the basic thing to predict the performance for our research. We need more deeply work, just like the deep learning or the active learning to guide us to dig the internal relationship and also to guide us to how to develop the kind of the materials we wanted or desired for the specific applications. So I think in the just of 5 or 10 years, we can have this kind of data, and also we can more deeper applications using AI. Thank you so much.
I have a question to both of you, but for Daniel, I haven't gone into to read too much about urban farming. What's the definition and scope of urban farming?
So the urban farming can be indoor as well. So we can use the space indoor in like those former factories that is no longer in the industrial use anymore. So we have a lot of indoor space that could be for more intensive farming. But then for the rooftop and so, and then it will be more not that intensive, but then could be good for the ESG and carbon and behavioral change, while the indoor in the factory settings would be more intensive. That can be focusing more on the enhancing the crop yields. So different settings will have different primary functions. While rooftop maybe not producing a very high crop yield, but then it's good for other things. While for indoor, like a factory settings, so it will be very intensive because we have also have some collaboration with the local industrial scale urban farming in Hong Kong as well. They are so packed with the lighting and the water supply and everything is like the shelf, like the bookshelf in the library, and they can be moved. So you can utilize, maximize the use of the space to enhance the crop yield.
Yeah, so from that perspective, because any of the proposition, if you want to become sustainable, it has to stand on its own feet. So in a more factory-based, soilless horticulture, whatever, it's its own business.
You're right. Because for the indoor, like the industrial types of the farming, urban farming, there will be different media. So either hydroponic or using specified or specific media as a growth media, not the conventional soil media. So it's a different setting. You're right.
Yeah. So, but I think from the extensive social impact perspective across urban community, certainly the goodwill of community participation, but that's very much driven by convenient methodology or cost-effective methodology available for example, people want to grow some vegetables in the balcony, okay, those kind of participation. I think that's a challenge. How do you facilitate and encourage that, which you have coupled methodology, materials, pots, whatever, to supply to community, which they can easily plug and play. So I think that's probably a lot of integrated research or integrated engineering methodology needs to be there. Otherwise, community is not going to do it.
Yeah, you're totally right. When we try to scale up and to promote to the community that we need economical solution. So actually, we have seen some more startups and some more new companies selling different products to enhance those green living behavior for the balcony, for the media, to support multi-level of planting or in your balcony. So we also see there's a lot more opportunities and startup with new products and new ideas to translate the research knowledge into real practice. So there will be a lot of things that we can contribute and play with and work with the industry. Yeah.
Thanks. AI. I remember there was a good presentation done by Professor Ning Yan in China, this famous biomedical protein expert. She raised a very interesting point. It says that any of the AI modeling will be very significant lagging behind the new knowledge discovery. She used the model of the configuration, using AI to configure a protein structure of the heart membrane or something, and she found all the model were wrong. Why? Because the knowledge of sodium pump embedded in the protein was not described properly. Therefore, the protein model, the configured, does not act like a heart membrane protein. So that she emphasized that is saying is, yes, AI is useful, but don't really let the AI drive your thinking process, because otherwise it's very dangerous. Any comments?
Yes, I totally agree with you, and also agree with Professor Ning Yan. Yeah, in my opinion, the AI just one tool. Just like as an engineer, we always use the Aspen Plus to secure up our research, and currently the calculation we use DFT. So this kind of approach or tools, which are helpful for us to find more interesting or important information. That's right. They cannot drive us for the next station. We should travel by ourselves to the next station. Yeah. Thank you. Is there? Yeah.
Because I also doing something about AI and machine learning, and very interesting questions has been raised, and I'd like to add some comment, I think. Firstly, as mentioned by Professor Yuan, so AI is heavily dependent on the data quality. So as mentioned by Professor Huang, so if the hard, let's say, hard data has not been well characterized, so the model built on the data cannot predict correctly. So it is highly dependent on the data quality. So if the data we collected are reliable, and I think maybe the machine learning model built on the reliable data can be useful. So this is, I think, the key for us to build robust machine learning models. As for the future of AI in environmental science, I think maybe currently, as we can learn from many leading papers, so currently our focus is shifting from building the model. So we are focusing more on what we can learn from machine learning models. So currently, several years ago, we have a good AlphaGo. So the machine learning model can beat the best Go players, human Go players. So currently, actually, the Go players are learn from the machine learning model how they play the Go. So it is the way how we human or scientists interact with the machine learning model. Maybe we can learn from each other instead of we just rely on the prediction of machine learning model. And I think maybe another thing is that what we can use the machine learning model to help us. So instead of just make the prediction, maybe we can use the trained machine learning model to scream out many options for us. And then we can just focus on several very promising options for us. So it can reduce the loss of experiments. The cumbersome experiments for us. So in this way, maybe machine learning can help us. And I think for environmental science, maybe the AI-powered global environmental study maybe is another future. So if we can collect a global data set and then apply it globally, so it can provide us a global perspective. Let's say the biochar effect on crop yield. So maybe if we can do a global perspective, maybe we can evaluate how can the biochar, if the biochar was applied globally, how it will increase the global crop, so that it can support the sustainable strategy. So this is my ideas about AI or machine learning models. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty key information to be shared with us. Yeah. Maybe we are out of time. Yeah. So let's move to the next session. Thank you again, Professor Song and Professor Philip Tak. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much all for the active participation in the panel discussion and the Q&A session. And a big thank you to all the speakers for your valuable insights on the critical areas of importance in today's world. Now I would like to invite Professor Ock to deliver the closing remarks and finish our session for today. And also I would like to tell that the second part of our event, the XLab Day event in Busan, will commence tomorrow and run for 3 days, offering an excellent platform for in-depth discussions on the talks we had today.
Okay, hello everyone. As we conclude the talk concert of BrainLink X Lab Day event, I'd like to thank each of you for your active participation today, and I think it has been inspiring to share insight and discuss the vital connection between sustainable soil management, biodiversity conservation, and the concept of ESG as just then indicated. And special thanks to our speakers, and I think though this event is excellent, but they had to take a very tight schedule for the trip flying from Canada, Australia, and Germany, etc. And I think they may suffer from the jet lag. So I really appreciate to the speaker and then our staff and our sponsor, the ministry, and the Korea Science and Technology Federation for their generous support. And most importantly, thank you for all of you making this event a success. And I thank the Professor Luo and Charles and our other distinguished guests. Actually, they didn't make a presentation today, but as you know, our event will move to Busan and continue for next 2 more nights and run for total 3 days and offering an excellent platform for in-depth discussion. I think the topic that we discussed for the AI application in the field of environmental science will be further discussed. And even though this is an open platform, but our event from tomorrow for 2 days will be closed session, so we can have more discussion and share our data for future collaboration. Thank you again, and wishing you a nice evening. And just one brief notification: we have a group photo that are officially prepared, so please stay and take a group photo. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Thank you.